Hello everyone. Today I'm talking to a man that I have so much admiration for, Peter Gash. Peter is a very tough man to put into any one box. He's an extremely passionate and very active conservationist, one that lets his actions speak louder than his words. He was a pioneer in Australian motorsports. He's a pilot that successfully owns and operates an aviation company. He is the managing director and caretaker of one of the world's most beautiful islands. He's a kind and caring friend, a loving husband and father, and he's an all-round good human being. I asked Pete to come into the studio and tell me his life story in full. This is the first time he's done it in such detail. It's raw, it's emotional, it's entertaining, and it's really packed full of practical wisdom. I honestly hope you'll get as much pleasure and inspiration out of it as I did. Please sit back and enjoy Peter Gash's incredible life story.
This
is the exploration
of
everything.
Well, I am very excited. We are now live and rolling, my friend. So, Peter, thank you so much for coming in. When your lovely wife messaged me on Instagram and said, you should talk to Pete, I was absolutely thrilled, mate. I thought it was a genius idea. I'm a huge fan of yours and all the work you're doing. So big congratulations about the award last night, mate. The Eco Tourism Award for Queensland, is that what it was?
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, it's actually the Steve Irwin Eco Tourism Award, and that's really close to my heart because, as you know, Steve and I were mates, and so yeah, the Irwin family and the Australia Zoo sponsor this category every year, the Eco Tourism category, and it's about who puts the most effort into ecotourism, and it's a big word, ecotourism, because it's a big subject, you know. To me, it's more of a DNA. It's more of a how you live your life. It's how you do things.
Well, congratulations on the win. And you've also just turned 60, mate. So happy birthday for that as well.
60 last week. And something else to throw in the mix there is I got a bit of a surprise because I know my missus loves a bit of a party. She threw one for me when I was 50 and she rented the roller coaster at SeaWorld in one of the rooms. And we're all going around the roller coaster for a bloody couple of hours. So this time I thought, I don't know what's going to happen at 60. And we had a hangar party at the aircraft hangar there down at Gold Coast Airport. And I knew that I seen the pinball machines going in and a few things and a few lights, so it's going to be a bit of fun. What I didn't know is she actually did a This Is Your Life. And she's happy to share that with you if you want to. So they actually literally did a This Is Your Life and did all this homework and dug out all this stuff, which is why this is timely, because it just clicked a whole bunch of files open in my head.
Right.
You know how the human brain works. It's all about files, and they're all shut. But they came open about a week ago, and it's like, oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, yeah, that's right. And one of my pilots was the presenter, and they actually embossed a book and everything. They had people from all around the world, and they videoed them, and they talked to us, and went for a bloody hour. So I'm still getting over it.
Man, I would like to watch that or listen to that. That'd be awesome.
Funny.
But before we get in, because the big thing I want to do is get into your life story, mate, because there's a lot of chapters to that are very interesting.
Yeah.
But the big thing that for people that don't know you, how would you describe yourself now? Because you're a pilot, you're a conservationist, you're a resort manager and island caretaker. Like there's so many hats that you wear. How would you describe yourself at this present time?
Yeah, that's a great question, mate, eh? And I think we all evolve in life. You know, and as you'll go through my story, you'll see that. But I see myself now as a conservationist, but I see myself as a pragmatist in that conservation's critical and the future of the planet is critical. But human beings are highly intelligent creatures, and we've evolved here. We've naturally evolved here, just like every other animal and every other living thing. So we need to be financially sustainable as well as environmentally sustainable. And I like to think that what we do with our business fits into that slot. That we can make it pay. It's financially viable, but it's environmentally sustainable. It's good. We're learning how to improve how we deal with the environment. You know, minimise our footprint, and yet still maximise our enjoyment of being human beings on this planet in the 21st century, and enjoying ourselves. So, yeah, I'd probably call myself a conservationist with a pragmatist twist in there somewhere.
Mate, that's a good description. But how? Let's go back to the start then. Let's go back to where you were born, what your upbringing was like to get you to this point where you're now the ecotourism winner for the state. So where did it all start, bud?
Yeah, mate. My parents, my mum and dad met when they were young, too young probably by today's standards. Like mum was just 17, my dad was 20 or 21 or something like that. Bit similar to Julie and I. And mum fell pregnant early. My sister was coming along. They were share farming down in the Goulburn Valley in central Victoria.
Right.
And so they were milking cows and doing that sort of stuff.
So share farming, is that obviously that's not a practice that's around a lot anymore?
Yeah, absolutely it is.
It is, okay.
It's a term that unless you're in the farming game, you won't hear it. Basically,
that shows how much farming
this
I
bloke
do.
owns the farm, you do the work. Okay,
Right.
and then you have an agreement with how much you earn and how much you pay him.
Right.
So you might pay a flat rental.
Right.
You might pay so much out of every dollar you earn.
Right.
And it's share farming.
Okay.
And it was very common because young people can't afford a farm. But if they share farm with old Freddie, the bloke who's got 5,000 acres, he might say, well, you use that 1,000 over there or that 100 over there, because it was dairying in those days. So I was born around that time, and Dad, he wasn't really a farmer, but he had a good crack at it. And then he went into transport, earth-moving machinery and trucks. So I first popped into life in the Mooroopna Base Hospital, which is, Mooroopna is really a suburb of Shepparton on the Goulburn River down in the Goulburn Valley. And Dad, by then he was into trucks. He had his going at share farming. Mum's parents were farmers, dairy farmers. Dad's dad was he was a shearer and a firewood cutter, which I've done a fair bit of myself. And so they were around Echuca, Shepparton, that area. Dad's got his trucks. He's moved into a little town called Merrigum, which is on the railway between Echuca and Melbourne.
Right.
And that's where I first woke up, you might say, where I can see vision of what happens in life, you know. And I went to a little school there called Merrigum Primary School.
And it's a pretty rural area at this time?
Oh, the town probably had 50 people in it.
Yeah,
you know?
right.
Might have been 100 people. I'm really not sure. We're talking, I was born in 59.
Right.
And so I've got memories going back into my, 3, 4, 5 years old doing stupid things in the house as a kid, and going to school. But Mum and Dad pretty quickly worked out that they didn't get on real well. It wasn't a marriage made in heaven. But like all young people, they tried. And Dad had trucks and he drove interstate, started hauling butter and hay and you name it out of the farming country. Then he went to stock crates and he had livestock, sheep, pigs, cattle. So I remember spending a lot of time in the truck with the old man. We'd go away. I remember learning how to read on the road. I'd read the signs and I'd try and work out what the signs said, and I'd ask Dad. And him and Mum weren't doing good. I had 2 sisters, one older, one younger. We moved to another little town called Tachura, which is not far from Merrigum. And both Mum and Dad's families were there in that area, Kyabram, Shepparton, Tachura. My nan worked in the Golden Circle factory at Shepparton in the season, and Pop would be working in the Carnation Milk factory when he wasn't cutting firewood up on the river or shearing sheep. And Dad would be driving trucks, loading hay. He taught me I could drive a semi around a paddock with a hay loader on the side of it, and he'd be out on the side and he'd be grabbing the hay bales and chucking them on the truck. I couldn't hardly reach the pedals. He would literally put it on the track and get it going. Then he'd get back over the body and onto the truck, and I'd just steer it around and hook up the bales. And he'd yell at me if I missed one. Like I'm probably 6, 7, 8 years old, Couldn't drive it, but I could steer it. And so we done a lot together. Spent a lot of time in the truck with the old man, and I could see early that him and Mum weren't really gelling so good. So I went to Tachura, did a year or 2 there, and that's where I wanted to learn to play a guitar.
Right.
But funny story, this one. But they didn't have any money, In them days, money was tough, so we didn't have anything spare. So I kept badgering Dad. He didn't have the spare money to buy me a guitar, so I went to this bloke who was going to teach me. We just got a lump of wood. Stick of wood, and we drew the strings on the guitar stick and the frets. Yeah. I used to go to lessons, literally. I was probably one of the earlier air guitarists, and he would just show me how to put my fingers on this thing and play the chords, That's how he did it. So I learned to use my imagination.
Right. So did you ever pursue that and actually get a guitar, and you still play today?
Which is what led to both Amy and Chloe playing guitar.
They're your daughters?
I was never, my 2 daughters, and my youngest daughter Chloe is now signed to ABC Music, and she's done up to level 8 piano. She's played saxophone, lots of singing and stuff. But she just one day she said, "Dad, give me that guitar of yours." Because you know what you can and what you can't do.
Yep.
I'm no good with the guitar, but I love it. You know,
Yep.
I just never. It just wasn't easy.
Yeah.
But I loved it. So yeah, she's a guitarist in the she calls alternate country music scene. She writes her own music, sings her own stuff, and
Fantastic.
plays her own guitar. Yeah.
Fantastic. And it all started from you using a plank of wood with some frets and strings drawn on.
Drawn on, mate. I mean, think about that.
Yeah.
So I had to project my mind. Because I'm a visual person, and I think about, childhood where there was nothing spare. You had to make your fun.
Yep.
We'd go down to the channel at the back of the place at Tatura with a bit of cotton wool and a little bit of mince, and we'd wrap it around, and we'd sit down there and we'd get yabbies, and you had to pull them out, and we'd go and cook them, and that'd be a bit of a treat,
So how long did you live in that region for, mate, before you moved on? Because I know at some point you were in Adelaide, because there's a great story on the first time we met and how we first met. And I like to describe you as my roommate. We're only 50 years apart.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. What happened was, it depends. My dad's not alive now, so I can't dig into his head for some of this stuff. My mum is. But Mum went through a lot of pain, and I think a lot of it's not clear in her mind. But I recall being in Tatura when the moonwalk happened, like when they landed on the moon.
Right.
But somewhere thereafter, Mum come and got myself and my 2 sisters, stuck us in a car one day, and we were gone. And we left. And our name got changed, and we got in a bus, and we were people with no home, and off we went, headed to Adelaide. And our name changed a couple of times on the way. We're in a bus. Just the story of Mum and Dad not making it, that's the truth of the story, and I have some memory of it, and some of it's clear, some of it's not.
And you don't know why, because that's a pretty extreme shift. And I know separating at the time, it's a different mentality back then. It wasn't as easy or accepted to separate from your partner. But was there anything more? Was it physical violence or domestic violence that to push your mum to grab the kids and leave interstate, or is that something you just don't know?
Certainly there was a lot of noisy violence. They'd be yelling.
Right.
I'd hear the yelling, and so I grew up through some pretty uncomfortable nights where they'd be yelling and screaming. But I guess that was just 2 people that were probably thrust into a situation. It was basically, in the old words, a shotgun wedding.
Yeah.
Mum fell pregnant, and this family, you don't do that. Bit closer?
Bit closer. Just pull it up just a little bit higher, just so it's just like that.
Sorry, mate. You don't. Do you want to run back over that, or you're right?
No, that's all right, mate.
Okay, so you don't do those things. So, look, Mum would tell you one story, Dad would tell you another.
Yeah,
and I probably favoured Dad, because I probably saw a few things that Mum didn't realise I saw.
Right.
And when you're young, you might be young, but you're not stupid.
Yeah.
And so we had a couple of name changes, and we went on a bus, because in days airplanes weren't around. You went on a bus, and it was like a 3-day trip to Adelaide. And we ended up in the Salvation Army People's Palace. That was my first home in Adelaide. And I hung out there for a while. And then Mum got a job babysitting for some bloke whose wife had passed or something. She had 3 little kids, like I would have been 8 or 9. So my sister would have been 10. My youngest sister would have been 6 or 7. And so I went to Edwardstown Primary School, and I went to we live in somewhere near the South Australian rubber mills. I'm a bit unclear on exactly where I was. Anyway, so somehow or another I managed to get a message to the old man where we were. I'm a bit hazy on it. He told me that I rang him, and then he got in the car and he come and he found us. And Mum was pushing back, so I got in the car and I went with Dad. And we drove back to Hastings in Victoria, because that's where the old man's brother was.
Right.
So it was pretty turbulent, because by now the old man had 5 or 6 trucks, all on hock, the old AGC days, owed more than he had.
Yep.
And by then he'd built up a service station and a produce store in Tatura. And what really sticks in my mind, one of the most exciting things that ever happened to me was during that period while we were there living in Tatura, and I was learning to play the guitar, as I called it. The old man some bloke showed up in town, landed in the footy oval with an airplane,
Right.
little Cessna 172.
Right.
And somehow or another he must have convinced Dad to go and have a flying lesson. So Dad's grabbed me and Mum and we've gone out there, and I was just like a kid in heaven. I got in the back of this aeroplane with my eyes like saucers, and we flew out to Turin. We flew up over Mount Feathertop and Mount Beauty, and I can just still see that flight, and I can still see looking over him and the other bloke's shoulders, and I knew that's what I'm going to do. I was 7 or 8. I knew I was going to fly airplanes one day.
Wow. See, my first experience of hopping on a light airplane, probably around the same age as you, when I grew up in Bundaberg, I was shitting myself the whole time. Yeah, I thought, get me off this thing as quick as possible. I was in the Boy Scouts, and there was, you get a aviation badge. So I wanted to get that aviation badge so bad. So I did all the things that you have to do, and then the last one is you go for the flight around the town, and you tick off the last thing in the badge. And I cried, and I was frightened the whole time.
And how old were you then?
I was about 7 or 8, mate. I was about the same age, and it just frightened me. So it's always so interesting to find someone that the same experience just had the complete opposite effect on them. It's obviously led to a long life of aviation for you.
There was a level of, I don't know if you'd call it fear. It was like, whoa, this is out of this world. I'm looking down. I'd spend a lot of time up the front of the truck. Like I can recall the old man used to put me in the steering wheel when I was that little, and he'd steer. And then eventually, so I was helping him steer. Then eventually he'd put me on his knee and I'd steer. And then eventually I'd sit next to him and steer. Literally a big heavy truck on the road. So I loved machinery. I loved trying to manage a machine. But then when I got in that airplane, it was like, well, this thing's different, but how cool is this? It was really fascinating to me. So that was my first experience, and that was back before we made this move to Adelaide. And so yeah, we did that. We went to Adelaide, and then Dad had a good hard go at trying to convince Mum. They were falling out over the differences, and so she didn't want him to stay, and I was pretty damn clear. I was fairly strong-willed from an early age. I'm not hanging out here. I'm going with Dad, and so I did. I went back to Victoria with my dad and went down to Hastings for a time, and
your sisters didn't come with you.
They stayed with
my
mum.
With Mum. You went with Dad.
Yeah. And look, you asked the question before about violence. Yeah, I did. I saw a lot of stuff. When I'm really honest with myself, there was holes punched through walls and holes punched through doors, and people running around with knives waving them at each other.
Right.
And that sort of, I don't know how my brain processed it, to be honest. I used to just lie in bed crying, thinking what's going to happen next, And I was only little, and sometimes my sisters saw that, and sometimes they didn't. And so I just wanted peace. And to me, having the old man and the old lady apart meant peace.
Yeah.
But I loved them both, and they were both very good to me. They were both good parents. I think they weren't good. They weren't not good people, but they just couldn't live together.
Some people are like that. They just don't gel together, and especially back then, where again, it's not accepted that you can have a child with someone and maybe not be the right fit for them. It would have been extremely difficult, and there would have been no avenues for them to talk about that. They're in a marriage, they've got kids, they've got to stay together. It's not like today where, hey, this isn't working, let's be really civil about this and let's go about our life in a different way where we understand that we're not two people that work well together. So I can only imagine how difficult it would have been for them.
And I look at it now and I think, how the hell did Mum do what she did? What motivated her? Because that's a serious offence in today's world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Off we went.
Yeah. 3
different names between we went from, she took us from Tat, we ended up via Nathalia to bloody Robinvale or somewhere else, and next thing we're in Adelaide, and each time we stopped, we'd have a different name change, so the old man couldn't track us. It was just crazy stuff. But when you're a little kid, my memory of it at the time was it was all a bit exciting, in that moment. But then when I had time to stop, and when it was in the People's Palace, I mixed with some people that I knew they were different to me. I knew that I had a core that was right. My parents had taught me right from wrong, and I understood some things you do and some things you don't do. And in some of those places that I spent time, it was like, whoa, that's not Pete.
Yep.
So some of the things that I saw happen and people do, even as young people, I hung out with lots of young people, I could see that, I was different. So I learnt pretty quickly that I had to find out how to keep myself away from stuff that was going to get me in the wrong place. Now and again, I probably went a bit far, but mostly I had some moral compass that kept me out of that trouble. And I put it down to my mum and dad, you know. They were good people, even though they couldn't live together. Went to church in the first few years, that sort of stuff, like Sunday school. So obviously they had a good moral compass, mum and dad. So somewhere along the way, the old man just decided he'd lost everything. AGC took his trucks and everything off him. He lost everything. We had nothing. And he wanted to try and patch it up with mum, and I didn't disagree with him. But he was quite sick. He'd had something happen, and his version was different to mum's, but he was carrying something in his body that wasn't good. And we got in a car and we drove back to Adelaide, and we moved into a place with mum in a flat near Edwardstown for a time with my two sisters, and mum was actually there renting with someone else. And Dad went and he worked at the South Australian rubber mills at night shift, and come home one night and a couple of things happened that night I wouldn't repeat, but wasn't good. And I remember saying to the old man, we got to leave here. And I was probably 10 by now, maybe. Then we got to leave here. This is tears coming, you know. So he didn't want to. He wanted to try and save it. So we end up renting it. It's the flat. It's a high density population. We're going to get a house. He had no money, but he was going to try. Somehow or another, he convinced someone to rent us a house in Seacliff. And my old man could drive anything, he'd fix anything. So somehow or another, he talked his way into a job at Commercial Motor Vehicles, CMV as it was called in them days, as a mechanic. And we lived in Seacliff, and I went to Seacliff Primary for a time. And I think I did a year or 18 months there. So by now I was probably 11 or something. But the tears were still going. It was a hopeless case. It was never gonna patch. And somewhere in there, and my memory of it's a bit sketchy, and some things I probably wouldn't repeat. But basically, I recall Mum saying to me, I was wanting to go to the Adelaide show with my buddies, so I was probably 10 or 11. Went fancy letting the kids do that in nowadays, you know. We went to the show and I come home, the house was empty. There was no one, there was nothing. So it was like, oh shit. So I remember thinking, oh, so I'm a homeless youth, you know. And there was nothing. The house I'd been gone for the day. I come home on the train and there was a bit of furniture and an old boat that Dad and I had there, and that was about it. So I went walk about for a bit, and bugger me, I ran into Dad in the car looking for me. So we went back, and he'd obviously paid the rent, so we moved into what was left of the house, and we hung out there for a time, and it was in Adelaide that I fell in love with the water when I was at Seacliff, because when I was in Tatura and Merrigum and those towns, there was really, besides the river, you know, what you call the irrigation channels and the basins, you didn't have much sea. So we went and saw the ocean down there, you know, and you know what it's like, Merino Rocks and Seacliff and Brighton. And so Dad and I had bought this old bloody boat. It was a bit worthless, but we had the energy, and we during the period that we were there in Seacliff, we'd tidied it up. It was a sailing boat. And we used to go sailing together. It was like, you couldn't take the grin off my face when we went sailing, you know. It was just fantastic. And so when Mum had moved on with my sisters again, I don't know exactly how it all went, but I seem to remember saying to the old man, mate, come on.
So were you still friendly with your mum and your sisters at that time? You'd had a little bit of a falling out, and you were very much in your kind of dad's camp?
I guess you saw it like that, you know. When I look back on it, I love my sisters and we all get on good now, and I love my mum, but she'd probably struggle with hearing me telling this tale the way I'm telling it.
Yep.
And I've tried to talk to her about it, and, yeah, she struggles with some of it. And I sometimes wonder, Jesus, I imagine all this, but I've talked at times with my sister. I don't think I'm imagining too much of it at all, you know. So, yeah, Mum and the girls were in one camp and Dad and I were in another. So when Mum and the girls left again, I was almost relieved, even though it was pretty tough. And so we hung out there for a little time, but he couldn't pay the rent. So we went, I don't know how he did it. We went and he found this little flat down on the beach at Brighton. Don't know how he did it, the old man. He was a resourceful old bugger. He never stopped working. He had a work ethic that was extraordinary, you know. He'd just keep working. I remember him when we were on our own, because, of course, he was a young bloke. So he would have been, I'm guessing he would have been in his 30s. Well, a young bloke in his 30s, we ain't got a missus, he's a young bloke. So he'd often go out on the rantan and I'd get up in the morning, he still hadn't come home.
Right.
So I'd go to school and I'd come home, and sometimes it'd be a night or two, sometimes more, sometimes less, but I learned to be resourceful myself.
Right.
Cook my own chops and make my own wheat bix and stuff.
Would have made you very independent.
Yeah, so it didn't hurt, but it was educational, I suppose, when I look back on it now. But then he worked hard and he did a lot, and he taught me to work hard. I helped him sanding the boat and fixing the boat, and then that was when I first worked in a store. It's amazing. I look back on it. I was working in a place on the main road that runs up the hill. I forget what it's called, where it goes up and then Merino Rocks is on your right and the beach is down on your right there. Just as you're going through Seacliff, you go up this hill, and we lived in Thomas Street, which turned off it and went up. And there was a bunch of stores on the right. Yep. There was a little model store. And remember, I'd fallen in love with airplanes, right? Yep. So I used to draw them because that was all I could have. Right. I draw one. So I'd draw every airplane you could see. And I loved them. I drew them all over my school reports because I didn't do real well at school, even though I was pretty good with maths and I was pretty good with English. I was probably a little bit of a renegade. Probably, but I could be a good kid, but I could be a shit when I wanted to be, as I guess most kids can. Yep. So I loved my airplanes and I drew lots of them. And then there was a little model store there in Seacliff. And I went in, I used to go and stand in the store, and this is where I learnt my imagination. I would just look at the airplanes. I couldn't afford one. And just stand in the store and look at them and think about them. And I learnt the phonetic alphabet, and I learned everything I could about an airplane. And this old bloke that owned the store and his missus, they were quite good to me. And if you want one of those, yeah, but I haven't got any money. And so they let me spend a few hours every Saturday morning working in the store, and I would then accumulate some money, and eventually they gave me a model, a balsa wood one, and then I built it, and then I would fly it. And these were all the things that were going on, partly when Mum and Dad were together, and then partly afterwards, and some of it's a bit hazy. And these people were really good. I mean, now and again, they'd go and leave me there to run the store. And like,
how old are you at this time?
10 or 11 years old. And I think, really? But then I look back, and there was a time when I had a 11 or 12-year-old kid that would man my aviation office for me. So it wasn't all that different. It's a matter of when you know a person and you've got confidence in them that they're capable or they're not. Yep. So, these people, I'm sure his name was Pay, was his surname. Can't think of their first name. Lovely people, bloke and his missus. And they had this little model store. So I'd spend a few hours in there every week just learning how to fix model airplanes. And, I was addicted to airplanes. But Dad had a sailing boat that we built, and
so your love for aviation is growing all this time, and it sounds like it's a bit of a release for you too. Like with all this chaos happening in your personal life, this little hobby airplanes and this dream of flying, and the thing you've done is a bit of a relief in this kind of hectic world. Plus, then these are all elements that come into your life a lot later on and make you who you are today. But then obviously the connection with the ocean as well, being down in that beautiful spot in Brighton. And I think I better quickly tell the story of when we first met and the weird connection that we have too, is that 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I was flying out to do a discovery shoot on the Lady Eliot Island with Peter, and Peter is now, to spoil the end of the story, he becomes a pilot and runs an aviation company. And we were flying out there, and I was sitting up the front, and I hadn't met you before, but I was sitting up in the cockpit next to you with the headphones on, and you were giving me a lovely tour of, this is Fraser Island here. You can see the coast. There's some whales down there. It was really beautiful. And then we started talking about where you're from, what are you doing. Another time, me and my partner had bought a unit down in Brighton, in South Australia, the beautiful little old unit that was built in like the 50s or 60s. It was an old red brick thing right on the beachfront, really beautiful. And to cut a long story short, it was the exact apartment, not just the unit apartment, the exact apartment that Pete spent time in with his dad with a sailing boat. So we are now roommates, 50 years apart. So for us to have that conversation on that, what is a 1 hour flight out to the island, and we're sitting there and we're narrowing it down to the exact same room and to the exact same, my living room, that view that I look out on the ocean, when I'm down there is the exact spot
Yeah.
that you looked out on to fall in love with the ocean. I totally get it. When I sit there and the sun sets over the west side of the point where Adelaide and Brighton is on, it's stunning.
Yeah.
And it's like a painting. That window changes every day from when I wake up and I go out there for a swim every day. It is just a beautiful part of the world. So I can totally understand why you fell in love with it. One of the weirdest coincidences I've ever had in my life, sitting with you and narrowing down that we actually lived in the same apartment. For all the people in all the apartments in the country, you and I have lived in the same one. It was bizarre.
It was bizarre. And you're right, because I'm 60 now and I went to a lot of schools, so I met a lot of people. So because you saw how we drilled down to that in that discussion. Where are you from, mate? I'm from Adelaide. Whereabouts? So I'm from Brighton. I know Brighton. Oh, do you? Yeah. And we narrowed it down. That's one of my little habits. I like to know about people. I love learning about people. And yeah, of all the coincidences I've seen in my life, that was one of the bloody most amazing ones because there was 4 in that block. Yep. Could have been one of the other 3, but it wasn't, mate. You're in the one that I was in. Like, how wild is that, you know?
Exactly. And if I hadn't sat at the front of the plane that day, or I hadn't got the job to go on the shoot,
We'd
you
never
don't
have
meet
known.
people that live in an old apartment that you live in. So to do that, it was fantastic. Yeah. But I digress from the story, mate.
So I'm going to go back a little bit to where we're in Seacliff, because this is important, I think, because it's important to who I am today, and it tells you a bit about who and what I always was. Well, I'm at Seacliff Primary School. That was in the days when there was it was a bit like a current affair, but most of us didn't even have tellies in them days, you know, and that was when you had milk at school, you know, they brought the milk in the morning, and we certainly didn't have a telly in my early years too much. So you'd sit there and watch this current affair show. I remember seeing this show about all this negative stuff happening to the environment. I remember writing and forming in my brain on a bit of paper, because I had a pretty good imagination to draw things and do things, and I called it Leave Something for Us, LSFU. I felt that the environment was in trouble at that age, 50 years ago, and that society wasn't leaving something for the young people. And my mind said, I've got to do something. God knows how I was going to do it. Yep. But that was a part of my core. I think that core has flourished more now, or that element of me has grown out in the last 20 years, because now I can. In the early years, I was a survivor, mate. I had to survive as best as I could with whatever life was dishing at me, like most of us are. I mean, my story's probably a bit different, but it's probably not that different to a lot of young people, if you're honest with themselves. A lot of young people had a pretty rough ride, and they have to become a survivor. And it's how you deal with that. So deep in me was, airplanes, and then boats, and then the environment.
Sounds like when you were young and you were very good at locking on to things that you enjoyed and going, you know, that is me, which is a tough thing to do because there's so much choice. You can do anything, and especially when you're not so crash hot at the school and the school system and you're not going so well there, to go, hang on, I like airplanes. Something about the environment fascinates me, and something about the ocean fascinates me. It seems like you were fantastic at locking on to those things at an early age. At 10 years old, I didn't know what I was doing. I was riding my bike in circles out in the street and throwing rocks. That was about it.
I was doing that too. I was active, but I joined the boys. I joined the Cubs. You know, the Cubs, as they were called. I'm not sure if they still exist. When I was in Merrigum, I was a Cub, and so they taught you a lot of good values, and that was in fact where I look back and that was my first job. Was what we called Bob a job. Okay, so you went around, you knocked on people's door. G'day, mate, I'm Pete.
In your Boy Scout uniform?
Yeah, we're in your Cubs uniform, this funny little hat.
Yeah.
Can I mow the grass for you or something? And if you did a good job, they give you a bob. A bob was 20 cents. And so I was pretty, and then you had a form and you filled out, and then all the money you earned, you give to the Cubs. So I was a hard-working little beaver, and I always got the most each year for the couple or 2 or 3 years, whatever I did, in Merrigum, and then Tatura with the bobber job. And then I joined the Scouts, and then they called it the Scout Job Week. So I'd knock on the doors and I'd mow the grass, or I'd sweep their paths and earn some money. So that's the pragmatic, hard-working side of me. Come out from the old man and the old lady. They're both of them terribly hard workers. My mum's 81 3 days ago, and she's still working like she's 20. You know, insane. 2 artificial hips, and she'll clean houses out there in Texas where she lives for $15 an hour. She don't care. She works, you know. And the old man was working up until his body just wouldn't let him anymore. So I did that. And, of course, by learning early to go and earn a 2 bob or 10 cents or whatever they give us as a kid for the Scouts and the Cubs, I was very quickly pushing a lawnmower for someone. So when I'm paying off my model planes, when I Mr. Pay would give me a few bob, I then figured out I could go and knock on doors and say, do you want me to mow their grass? And the recipient was Pete. But Pete didn't have a mower, but I said, if you got a mower, I'll work it. So I was only 10 or 11. I was mowing people's lawns for a couple of bucks, or sweeping the lawns, or sweeping the grass, or using the wheel, because in them days you had a wheel. There was no whippersnipping and stuff, the old wheel, and I do whatever. You need it done, I can do it, And because, in the time when we're on the trucks, the old man was resourceful, and I learned to be resourceful. I mean, we had cattle trucks and like stock crates, and there'd be Dad and I loading a stock crate. So you'd have a yard full of pigs or a yard full of sheep or cattle, and he'd be up the front. You, get down the back, you little bastard. Chase him. That was him, He'd give me a big cattle prod. Zzz, zzz, zzz. And there'd be cattle bigger than me, and I'd be jamming at them. So I had to learn to look out for myself, and I come second to a few of them big buggers now and again. I'd have a few pigs come eye to eye with me, and the sheep weren't so bad because they were a bit easy to deal with, but the pigs and the cows, I had to be careful. So, yeah, all that stuff taught me to live on my wits, I suppose.
Yep.
Funny story. I'll throw this one in. I know I'm doing a Billy Connolly on you. I'm going like
That's all right, mate. We've got all the time in the world. We've got to get to this event tonight. We're going to an event together.
We got it. So when you were running those cattle trucks, those livestock trucks, they'd fill up with crap. The animals had crap in it. So when you unloaded the cattle or the stock, whatever it might have been, you then had to go and take it to a yard and hose it out. And I can vividly remember this happening. We've been driving. We'd go up to Forbes or Parks or Dubbo, and we'd get a load of something. We'd take it down to Melbourne or wherever the yards were, the sale yards, and then we'd unload it. And Dad it was a bit like share farming only with the truck. He'd do a deal with the bloke who owned the stock, and he'd get a percentage of the earn. And so it'd be me sitting in the truck with him. I didn't do a lot of schooling because I was in the truck a bit. I learned how to read. And so we'd be hosing the truck out. And I remember we've come home, we're late one night, and we pull up, and there's a place where you always park the truck. It was a concrete basin and a big area. And, of course, all the crap would come out the back and be a big pile. And here's little Pete standing down on the back, and the old man's hosing. And I can still remember it happened. I fell asleep standing there and fell backwards into the pile of poop. And of course, it was really sloppy because it's wet. And I've sunk into it. And I remember standing up screaming, and the old man's come found me, and I would have looked like a little covered in it. You can imagine. And of course, it's funny, but it wasn't, because I ended up in hospital because it went up my nose and in my mouth and in my ears. And they cleaned me out, and then I got all sorts of bloody diseases.
Infections everywhere.
Yeah. Oh, mate. So I rode through some pretty tough days, and another one that come to my mind, the old man bought one of the first MAN diesels, MAN truck. We had it in a big shed, and he was running it.
So is this like a big semi-trailer, is it?
But it was the prime mover that drives the trailer.
Right.
And it was one of the first ones that come into the country. And Dad was a fearless borrower, so he would have borrowed the money for it. And he's in there, and they're tuning it and tweaking it, and I'm sitting up in the cabin, and we're in a big shed. And I didn't have the nous to realise I was breathing the diesel fumes. Anyway, we got it sorted, out we go, and we get out, and we got out, and we're just driving through Shep somewhere. I wound the window down, and I vomited blood.
Oh.
And I'd been breathing all these diesel fumes, and it's never let me go. Like, I've had that challenge in my esophagus and stuff from that ever since.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I've got to be really careful, so I can't eat spicy tucker and stuff. So, there was a few bumpy bits along the way. But
So you're in Seacliff now, mate. You're in Brighton now, in the apartment. Your dad's coming and going, being a young man.
Yep.
In his mid-30s. And
used to go to the Seamen's Mission down at Port Adelaide.
The Seamen's Mission. That sounds like a seedy place to me, mate.
The old man would be there. He'd be shopping, as you can imagine. And I'd curl up under the bloody table and have a sleep sometimes.
Oh, really?
And then I'd say, mate, don't take me there. And I'd just stay home.
Yeah, right.
And, you can imagine what it was like.
Just the name of that place, mate. I don't know if I want to curl up on the floor of that place.
Now I think about it, it didn't mean that to me then, but it probably does. I think it was called the South Australian or the Port Adelaide Seamen's Mission or something, where all the seamen would go, the blokes, meaning the guys who drive boats, and they get off their boat. And they'd go out there drinking. And of course, there'd be a few of the fair sex that come down for a visit. And so there'd be a few boys and girls. And I saw a few exciting things there because in them days, no one was frightened to have a blue, so there was always a bit of a fist fight going on. And I guess I learned a bit of that caper when I was young because I'd gone from school to school. And
Port Adelaide's a rough area too,
yeah.
especially back in those times too. There was a lot of immigrants coming in there for the work that was in that area. So it was a really tough place for an 11-year-old kid to be sleeping under a table in a bar while this old man's trying to get lucky and you know getting a blue or something like that. That's a rough place to be, mate.
It was certainly educational, probably to put it that way. And because by now I've already been to about 8 or 9 schools. And you know the old story, I don't know how many schools you went to, but when you started a new school, usually the first thing you'll do is have a blue with 2 or 3 of them because everyone wants to test everyone out. That's just how it was. I don't know if it's still like that now, but that's how it was. So you found yourself, and sometimes you come out all right, but sometimes you got hurt, you know. But that was it, and you lined up again the next day. So here we are, we're in Brighton, and we got this little sailing boat, and he's struggling a bit. And they're still married, and Mum's moved to somewhere else. We don't know where. She's minimal communication. She's got my sisters, and she had another fella. And Dad never, to my knowledge, he never had another woman except for when he was on his own. You know.
Yep.
Mum had another fella, and she ended up marrying that bloke, and they ended up having another child, which became my half brother. Anyway, Mum and Dad were apart. She was. It turns out now, at the time I didn't know it, she was at Glenelg, not far from where we were. And so somewhere through all that, they got a date and they got a divorce. And I can remember, again, my imagination, I suppose, but I remember the day of the divorce, and I would have been 11, 11, maybe nearly 12 by now. So I've spent 3-4 years in South Australia, and I don't know the suburb of Adelaide, but Dad's got to go into the court, and at some point in time, because they're having an argument about me, because she's the woman, she's going to have the kids, and I've made it. Dad said, well, the son doesn't want to. He's got his own mind, and believe it or not, and I often wonder how that happened, but the judge asked me to come in and tell him what I thought. I said, I'm going with him, I'm not going with her, and you can do whatever you like on paper, you won't keep me there.
Yep.
If you give me to her, I'll still be with him. Somehow I'll find my way. And bless the judge, he let that happen. I think, bless Mum, she could see that strong-willed little bugger, let him go. That's what he wants to do. But on that day, in between me going into the court, I'm out in the yard, like out on the road, and over the road is a motorcycle store. And I can still see myself gazing through the window at these motorcycles and thinking, whoa, look at these things. So I spotted these motorcycles, and they were Hodakas, Hodaka, which I don't even think they make anymore. And I'd never rode one. I'd never sat on one. I'd never even probably seen one except through the window of this motorcycle store.
There seems to be like a pattern emerging here, Pete. Like something shiny, big, new comes in. Like whether it's a plane or a boat or something.
Motorbike.
You see it, your motorbike, your eyes light up, and you're just like,
because it takes my focus, mate. I'm very focused and driven. If I see a focus, bam, and that's where I get. Because Mum taught me something. I can still hear her saying it. Son, there's no such thing as can't. Don't ever tell me you can't do something. You can do it. If you want to do it, you can do it. If you want to have it, you'll have it. If you want to achieve it, you'll achieve it. And Dad probably did too. But I can hear the words coming out of Mum's mouth. She was hard on me. She used to belt the hell out of me at times. But she also taught me to be strong with what I wanted to do. So I was focused. So, I focused on the motorbikes, and that sort of got parked. And I'd focused on the airplane, but I was playing with them because I'd made the little models and I flew them on a string, you know, and I'd been sailing with Dad, and so I knew how to sail. And somewhere in that whole circus of South Australia, while I was mowing lawns for people, somehow or another I raised enough money, and Dad probably helped me, and I bought a little, what was it called, a little hold-fast trainer, which is basically a sabo with a little bowsprit and a jib. And I purchased it, and I joined the Brighton and Seacliff Yacht Club, Dad and I was a member there for 6 or 12, maybe 18 months. During that time, Dad had his boat, and the next thing I've got this holdfast trainer, and I sailed it with a couple of other kids. You know, I was hopeless at it. We'd race on a Saturday, I always come last, but I loved it because I couldn't afford lessons and that. But I had my boat. You know, it was a doing. I was a doer. So. Anyway, all of that aside, we then shifted. The divorce happened, and we were gone. We were out of South Australia, and we went back home. And Dad Dad's brother, Doug, who, bless him, he's still alive and he's in his 90s now. He was like Dad, but we used to call him the rat with the gold tooth. Old Doug, he always had plenty of money. He was always driving the best trucks. I remember running into him on the road at times. The two of them going the other way, and Doug would be in a Kenworth and Dad'd be an old Inter, you know. Doug always had it, and then he drove machinery, drove big cranes, and he made a lot of money out in Bass Strait driving cranes. He was working at Westgate Bridge. So Dad come home to his brother Doug, and Doug put us up. And they were in Hastings, and we'd gone there once and left there, you might recall.
Yep.
Went back to Hastings.
So you've packed everything up in South Australia this time?
Whatever we had and left.
That's it. The divorce is finished. That side of the family's gone their way. You've gone this way. So you've gone back to live with the golden rat with
Uncle Doug.
Uncle Doug.
And my cousin Wayne and his brother Graham and my auntie June. And they were bloody good to us, you know. They put us up for a time. And we took them a little holdfast trainer, and not a lot else. We didn't have a lot else, you know. And back we went. And while I was living in Brighton, by the way, I ended up going to Dramana Tech, my first high school. So I'd finished with Seacliff Primary and I'd gone to Dramana Tech. I think I only did like 1 term or 2 terms, and then we moved back to Hastings and lived with Uncle Doug. And then from Hastings I had to go to sorry, not Dramana Tech, Brighton Tech, I apologise. Yep. Brighton Tech, you know, which I don't know what it's called now. Yeah, it was called Brighton Boys Technical High School, somewhere near Brighton, and Dramana was in Victoria rather. So when we moved back to Hastings, then I went to Dramana Tech, which is down at Dramana on the Mornington Peninsula. And I had my little holdfast trainer, and I went sailing, and Uncle Doug had a pilot's license. So guess what?
Right.
Because as I said, Uncle Doug was the guy that had a few bobs, so he had a pilot's license. And he took us flying in something, and that just rekindled it more for the flying.
So was he a bit like you then, your Uncle Doug? Did he have that same kind of speed? He's obviously driving trucks. He's flying planes. I'm sure he had a motorbike somewhere. He did as well.
He did. Yeah.
Obviously a little bit like yourself, that he used to get very fixated on some of these big machineries and big things and go for it.
And his 2 boys had motorcycles. Wayne and his son and his brother Graham had motorcycles. And so when I've got back to Hastings, here's my cousins with motorcycles, you know, like dirt bikes. And I'd never ridden them, so I just watched the boys ride them, because by now I'm probably 14, I'm guessing, 13, 14, something like that. And I've gone back there and watching the boys on the motorbikes and watching the old man. And we lived with Doug and June for a while until Dad made enough money to rent a place. So we rented our own place. And Doug had the same work ethic as Dad. He'd start early, like 3 a.m., 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning. He was a milkman. He'd go out and he'd deliver the milk. When he'd finished delivering the milk, then he'd go and he'd drive trucks or drive cranes. They were both 2 days' work.
Just hard workers.
Hard workers.
Hard
you know?
workers.
So that was in my DNA. You work hard, boy. You don't. 8 hours isn't a day.
So when did you then get your first job and then kind of move away from them and become a little bit more independent? What were you doing when you did that?
When we were in Hastings at the age of 13 or 14, I got a full-time paper round, which gave me a regular income. I'd get up real early in the morning. I'd go and deliver newspapers off my bike. So I'd get like $1.50 a week or something. That was a lot of money for a young fella. And so I quickly worked out, I'd done a deal with the bloke who owned the paper shop, that if I worked hard and got up a bit earlier and got him in there, I could actually do 2 rounds in the morning before I went to school. So I'd go and do a round, which other kids would do 1, then I'd come back and I'd load the bike up and I'd go and do another round, you know. Kicking bloody dogs. Can you imagine round in those days? Hastings, mate. You know what Hastings is like? Pretty tough town. And so, yeah, I'd go out real early in the morning delivering newspapers, and then I was making money. And in that town there, Dad met a lady through Parents Without Partners, and she had 3 daughters and no husband, because he'd tragically died of a heart attack. And she was a lovely lady, and she lived at Rosebud. So long story short, they met. They fell in love, and they decided they wanted to get married. So Dad and I moved from Hastings to Rosebud on the Mornington Peninsula, and that's when I went to Rosebud High School.
Right.
I'm at about Form 2, and I've done a few schools and a few towns and a few different jobs. So I got to Rosebud and quickly went and met the paper shop bloke and quickly convinced him I could do 2 paper rounds. Then on the weekends I'd be pushing lawnmowers for people. And then my new mum, my stepmum, who mum and dad and her name was Merle, she worked in the local dairy, selling in the shop. But out the back of the dairy was where the milk came in, and then all the milk trucks went out in the morning. So she introduced me to old Jack Jennings down there, Uncle Jack as I called him. And he could quickly see this young fella's a hard worker. I said, can I work for you, Jack? So Jack would put me on. So I'd start down there way before dawn, loading the milk trucks, including the horse and carts, because in them days they still had horse and carts around Rosebud. So I'd pull the milk out and help the boys, Graham and Max and all the other boys, load their trucks. And then just before dawn, Jack would go and have a cup of tea, and I'd sit in the back of the landing area and have a little sleep for half an hour, and Jack would come back. And then the big truck could come from the Kinross Dairy up in Melbourne, and we'd have to unload a 20-ton truck of milk.
And you're still going to high school at this time? So this was all just before school. So you weren't still doing the paper route on top of this, were you?
Well, the dairy,
different days.
Yeah, different days. The dairy wasn't every day.
Right.
The dairy was whenever I had a spare day, like Sunday, for example, because I wasn't doing the paper round, and then in the summertime I give the milk run away because I could make more money. Right. And old mate would just get someone else to do the papers. He'd get a couple of other kids to do what I was doing. I had an old bike. Yeah. And so I done all that sort of stuff there. And then my sister was working in the golf club, so at night I'd go up there and wash dishes. And I'd get $20 washing dishes. That was good money.
Jeez,
and I'd get up early in the morning,
mate.
Go to the dairy, and I'd be loading trucks and milk, and I'd be hauling those big stacks of milk. And I'd look back and I think, geez, I was only a skinny, lightweight little bugger. And I'd be dragging, now and again I'd slip and the whole pack of milk would fall on me.
Jeez.
And the boys would come and help me. So anyway, I spent there, and that was where I finally saved up enough money to buy a guitar.
So hang on, you're 14 now. You started when you were like 7 on a piece of wood. So you've been practicing on a piece of wood for 7 years.
I think it went missing. I don't know whatever happened to that bit of wood.
Jeez.
So I finally bought a guitar, and I'm like a rat with a gold tooth, or maybe I probably can think of a couple other ones there. Like, anyway, so I've got a guitar, mate, and how cool's this? So I went to the music store over the road from the dairy, and there's a bloke called Vaughan Wilson there, and I said, "Can I pay you for some lessons? Teach me how to play this thing," because I knew how to do that. I didn't know how to do that. So he's probably thinking, I've got a bit of a retard here. He can do this, but he can't do this. So off we went, and I had me lessons, and I did well at that, as well as I could, but I quickly realised I wasn't going to be a world champion guitarist. And there were me and a few of the boys in the town formed a bit of a band. We called it Station. One of them had a bass, one of them had a lead. I played rhythm, someone played the drums. I didn't sing. They threw rocks at me. And so that went on for a while. Washing dishes at night with my sister from time to time, loading trucks with milk, delivering milk, mowing grass, paying off my boats. And it was there I bought a motorbike off a bloke. And it was a worn out old thing with a bald back tyre, but this guy could ride it like no tomorrow. And I used to just stand there and dream watching him. And eventually I managed to buy it off him. And I rode it for a bit, but it was always broken because he'd worn it out. And that, in the back of my head, still airplanes. Uncle Doug's taken me a couple of times. I've still got my little boats, and I love my boats, but I'm riding a motorbike, for goodness sake, And Dad had married Merle, and I all of a sudden I had 3 sisters because she had 3 daughters, and we were teenagers. We did a couple of years there. And another little thing that I guess shows my core. While we were in Rosebud, I hung out with. That was where I hung out with some people that I went pretty close to the wind on, and we did some things that I look back on it, and I say it to my girls now and again. I probably did some things I wasn't real proud of. Not super bad, but bad enough that when you do this thing, next thing it leads to this and this. And I had the wisdom to realise I'm getting out of this. This is going not so good. But it started with simple things, and we go out rabbit trapping. And so we trapped a rabbit. And the rabbit is in this metal jawed trap, and it's taken its leg down to the bone, and the animal's still alive, and it's trying to get out. But every kid traps rabbits, so they're all thinking it's funny. These kids, it's funny, Yeah. And I'm looking, I want to be sick. This poor animal, I just felt sick. So I thought, I'm weird, I'm different. So I didn't want to say to the kids, I feel sick, But I thought, I can't do this. So, but I have to go trapping because that's what you do, We had slug guns and 22s and all the things kids do. So I went and I got some rubber from the old man's, and I strapped it to the rabbit traps' jaws. So my rabbit traps had soft jaws.
Right.
So when I caught the rabbit, it hadn't been badly treated. But I just knew that this ain't right. I didn't feel good about it. I didn't feel good about some of the things we did with guns and that, chasing wildlife, and I could see that wasn't me.
And that's a big thing for a young man to kind of discover, especially at that time, because rabbit trapping, like you said, was a thing you could do. You could earn some money rabbit trapping. You could do some shooting rabbits and doing all sorts of different things back then was a totally acceptable job for a young kid to do to earn a little bit of pocket money. Because for people that don't know, they were a huge pest here, and they still are a huge pest in a lot of places. So to have the kids out there dealing with the pest, making a few bob, then it's a good thing. And
there was times when we got paid to clean paddocks out.
Yep.
We'd go in there with 22s, and the farmer would pay us a few bob to go and get all the rabbits and shoot them. And it just was not me, but I was one of the kids, one of the young fellas, and that's what you did, and it wasn't good for me at all. And I knew it wasn't good for me, and I knew it wasn't me, and I recognised at that point in time that I had a different view of life and view of wildlife, but because I'm in this fairly, I guess you all want to be accepted, you know what I mean? You don't want to stand out, you don't want to look different, because then you're going to end up in another blue with someone. So I was trying to be one of the other boys, but I could see that wasn't me. So I hadn't seen my mum since that divorce when we left Adelaide for some years. My sisters, I'd send them Christmas cards to the only address I knew, and I wouldn't hear back. And Dad married, and then we stayed in Adelaide. In Rosebud. I went to Rosebud High, and one day Dad and Merle come home and said, lots of things happened in that time, but they basically come home and said, we've bought a place in Queensland.
Right.
We're moving to Queensland, a place called Arachula, a caravan park. And it's like, Jesus, here we go again, I've been here for a couple of years. Like, this is really good. I'm in one place, now I've got to move again. But it was probably good, because I was probably we were probably doing things that I shouldn't have been doing, and I've only touched on some of it, just stupid things that, as I said, lead to, and thankfully I got out before it led to anything more than just silly and youthful. And so we moved up and left in 74, and we shifted, actually end of 74, early 75, we shifted to Arachula in the Fassifern Valley, the back of Queensland here, back of the Brisbane area, near Boona. And I went to the Boona High.
Right.
And by now that's grade 11.
And you're not spending long at these high schools either.
Some of them were 1 or 2 days. Like when I was in Melbourne, at some point in time, I went to Ormond East, I went to McKinnon, some schools I went to for 1 or 2 days. So it was just, I didn't really. Anyway, so we've moved to Arachula, and I'd had a motorbike and I'd had to sell it. I sold everything to move to Queensland. But something I have omitted to tell you, I can't believe it when I sit back and tell the story. I think, Jesus, did you dream this? While Dad and I were in Hastings, and Dad was working different jobs and I was mowing lawns and stuff, I wanted to build a boat.
Right.
I decided I'm going to build a boat.
Right.
So I sent away and I bought a set of plans. And I used to go out the back to this bloke called Terry Heron. I showed him the plans, and he must have been fascinating, this bloke. In comes this little kid. I was a skinny little runt, I never had any meat on me. And I'd wander in there, and I'm going to build this boat, Mr. Heron. Can you help me? So he helped me to get the wood, and he'd cut the bits and shape them and tell me what to do. And I started building this boat, and I got it. It was a sailfish, basically a big surfboard.
Right.
And I did all the woodwork myself and the screws and that, mate.
Yep.
And I got it pretty much finished, and I called it Valis because I had 2 sisters, Vicky and Alice, and I hadn't seen them for some years, and I was missing my sisters, and I was missing what had happened, and I named it after them. They probably don't even know that. And I was missing my mum, but I do what you do. So when we shifted to Queensland, I took this half-finished boat with me, dreaming that one day I'm going to finish it, which I never did, and I've been trying to find it ever since because I swapped it for something that's later on in the story. So anyway, we moved to Queensland, and I quickly bought a second-hand old motorbike for some bloke, which enabled me to get out and around the town of Arachula. And I quickly went out to the town and drove around and found all the farms. I rocked in and said g'day to people, just large as life. How you going? I'm Pete. You got any work for me? Next thing I was picking carrots and picking potatoes and driving trucks and loading potatoes up on the back and loading carrots and working in the carrot washers and, of course, meeting the other kids that had motorbikes. So before you knew it, we'd formed the Arachula Motorcycle Club.
They sound tough.
They were good kids. They were hard-working kids. And we were moving irrigation pipes and that and kind of going to school. We had to go by bus to school because it was Boona.
Yeah.
So
eventually this passion for motorbikes, so you were telling me downstairs something I didn't know about you. You started getting to more the entertainment side of things, didn't you? Like with things like early motocross and things like that. How far along in the story does that take place?
Yeah, so we're getting into that now. All of a sudden, motorbikes took over my world.
Yep.
Big time. And I could tell that I enjoyed it, and I could tell I wasn't too bad at it. And hung out Arachula for a time.
Yep.
Went to Boona, finished grade 11. I loved reading books. I read Lord of the Rings 7 or 8 times. I just used to disappear into that fascinating world. I could tell you anything you want to know about.
Great book series.
Started with The Hobbit and then The Lord of the Rings. You ask me, I'll tell you. I just read it and I read it and I read it.
Still one of my all-time favourite books is The Hobbit. I think it's
and there's so many
story.
lessons in life. Tolkien was writing lessons to his boy when he was writing that. And it just, there's so many things even today that I think about and I refer to that book and that's how it needs to be done. And we had the Arachula Motorcycle Club. A few of the boys had more money than me. They had some better bikes. They were farm boys, and slowly Pete saved up enough money, and I bought a TM125, an actual real one with knobby tyres, you know.
So that's like an off-road kind of
a motocross bike, an old scramble bike.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
We're talking about a 76 model bike, 76 model, 75 or 76 model bike, and this is like 76, 77, so one real old.
Yep.
Went fast. And I could ride it, and all of a sudden, from a kid that couldn't play footy, couldn't play baseball, wasn't too bad at basketball, but generally I wasn't on the sports field kid. I got a motorbike, I could ride it, and I thought, I can do this, and it made me feel good about myself. I'd been going through those times where you're not too sure how you're feeling about yourself because the other kids could whip me at all these different other sports. All of a sudden, wasn't too many people could whip me on a motorbike, and I enjoyed that. And so we'd go to the odd race meeting and I'd win. But these were just real basic things, you know, and I'd go and I'd come back with my old TM1 and I'd win and I'd get the trophy or whatever. And so the boys at Arachula, we all had a lot of fun and we'd run around and cause by now I got my driver's license. You know, I'm 17 by now because you get it at 16 and 9 months. And you had to go to the copper and he watched you drive around the block and gave you your driver's license. And
my mum tells a story how she got a license. The police officer watched her pull into the car park, and she came up and said, "Here to do my driver's license." He said, "I saw you pull in. Here's your license."
Yeah.
It was fine.
And that's what happened. Old Pat Crotty said that to me. He said, "Gashy, I've chased you on that bloody motorbike in that car enough times. And I've seen you on the bloody tractor." And he's tick, tick, tick.
Yep.
Yeah, different times, mate. You know, not today. But sadly, by now I've already seen a few of my friends go in the ground dead. You know, going too fast on the road, too much alcohol, because at that time I was drinking a little bit. You know, as soon as I could, I did. I remember trying to smash down a dozen cans when I was about 15 or 16, because that's what we were all going to do. That was the sort of stupid things that we were starting to get into. And the motorbikes, in my view, the motorbike saved me because I couldn't do that and ride my bike. So next thing, Dad's come home and said, we're selling up the caravan park. We're moving to the Gap in Brisbane. It's like, Jesus Christ, here we go again. And I think at that time I just got my driver's license, so I could have chosen not to stay, you know, with them, but I shifted. And by now I was working at the Dinmore Meatworks amongst other jobs. I drove into Dinmore in my old car. Working at the Dinmore Meatworks.
Jeez, you've had more jobs before you were 17 than I've probably had in my life, mate.
Yeah, driving a strapping machine, strapping up boxes of meat in the boning room. And we're working in the boning room. There'd be 1,000 blokes between the kill floor and the boning room at the Dinmore Meatworks. And I started there when I was 16, before I had a driver's license. And old Murray Moffat, the local butcher, he was a bit like me. He'd go and he'd work the meatworks. Then on the weekend, he'd open his butcher store in Arachula. And so he'd take me to Dinmore.
Let's pull that one just across a little bit more.
And so in the meatworks, that was a really tough gig because you can imagine what you dealt with there when you had 1,000 men and women working on the kill floor and the boning floor, and then going into the lunchroom. We had what we called Lapo. You had a 10 minutes break every hour, and then you had Smoko every second hour, and then you had lunch. So you got 1,000 fairly volatile people in there, and half of them got knives. So I saw some pretty wicked fights and stuff in there, you know, and I could see short term this, not going to keep doing this. But I learned a lot there, and learned to drive the strapping machine and learned to sharpen knives and stuff. And but yeah, could see it wasn't good. I learned about unions there. I quickly worked it out that when we drove into work and the holding paddocks had stock, we're working.
Right.
But when we drove into work and there was no stock, be buggered, we were going on strike. We were going on strike.
Right.
And the union delegate would tell us, we're going on strike. And I think, hang on. I remember standing up and saying, hang on, big mistake.
Yep.
I got the shit belted out of me for standing up, you know. So I bailed on the meatworks. I could see there's no future here for me because I had my own mind and didn't suit my thinking. So, we've moved to the Gap in Queensland. And by now I've been working enough. I've saved up enough money. I've got myself a car, got myself a trailer. I've sold my old TM125 and I bought a brand new motorbike.
Wow,
brand spanking new RM125B. And I've joined the Autocycle Union. I've got an actual legal racing license and I'm 17. And along the way, one of my buddies, before I got to my new bike, we'd go to race meetings. I had this old thing. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't as good as some of the other boys had new ones. One of my mates fell off one day and he said, you ride my bike, because he had a nice brand new CL125. And so I rode that bike and I won on it. And so my brain said, I can do this, and if I get a good bike, I'll do it better.
Yep.
And I won quite convincingly, and I felt pretty good about that. So I could see that there was a course possible for me there. Throughout that period, a good mate of mine, Tom.
So what did you win? Like, if you won is it cash? Is there enough to go, like, I can make a little bit of money on the side doing this?
No, it was a trophy.
It was just
or it was the glory.
It was just the glory
More
amongst
than
your,
there was
amongst
no
your
money.
mates to go.
Yeah, there was a bunch of blokes that come to it, and there'd be a semi-organised event, no insurance, no legal event. It was just an event. But, there might have been 20 or 30 riders, and I'd come out doing pretty well. So while I was there, a good mate of mine, his name was Tom, and he rode Yamaha, and I could beat him when I rode my mate's Honda, but I couldn't when I had my old TM125. And sad story, one night I got a call to say Tom had committed suicide. So that was my first brush with that. I'd had plenty of brushes with people going too fast, hitting trees. I had 4 mates, 4 brothers in one car when I was 16, all died, hit a tree one night, had to go to the funerals. So I think by the time I was 19 or 20, I'd buried like more than a dozen of my mates. And so my brain is fighting with this, thinking this alcohol and this speed on the road, because we went too fast. We drove old cars and we drank too much, and because you're racing on the track, now you're racing on the road. It was stupid, but that's what young kids did. And you only got to look around you now. It's still going on, that sort of stuff. So I bought my brand new RM125B. Tom had suicided, sadly, and I'll never forget it. And I cried.
It's a tough thing, man. I had one of my closest friends when I was 19 did the same thing. Yeah. He was incredibly intelligent, outgoing guy, an amazing bloke, could have done anything with his life. And when he ended it, it was such a big pivotal moment in my life. And like, I've done a lot of big things in my life, and I've had a lot of big things happen to me, but that at that age when I was 19, same situation, you're probably drinking too much, pushing the boundaries as you do when you're in your late teen, early 20s with you hanging out with your mates. But when he did that, it shocked me into just going, shit, I need to start looking at the things that I actually really like and I want to do. Otherwise, I'm on a path right now that is not going to end well for me. And that mightn't be to that extreme, but it might be in a life that I'm not going to be proud of at the end of it. And that was a really pivotal point for me, so I can understand how heavy and emotional that is for a 19-year-old to lose one of their very close friends from something.
And when Tommy died, I was probably 17. 16 or so. I was probably just 17. And sadly, he used a gun in his bedroom, and they took him 3 days to find him. So it wasn't a wonderful situation by any stretch, and I still remember it. But anyhow, so moving on with the story, I bought this brand new RM125B, and I rode it on a couple of race events. I joined ACU, and I was in what they call C grade, basically the slowest blokes. And you had to earn your way to B grade and A grade. You had to win so many races. I went out and bam, and I won. Bam, and I won. It was like, whoa, I was a bit shocked. You know, I mean, I felt like I could ride the bike, but once I had a new one, I really could. And then I went to a track called Conondale in late in 77. I think I just turned 18. And I got a bad start. And I was really good off the start. I could, in motocross, the trick is the whole shot. First guy into the first corner, you got the race half done. As long as you can hang on, you've got it done.
Right.
So I could go bam and pull that corner. There was something, I had good reflexes. I don't know what it was, but I could nearly always pull that first corner. And on this day, I didn't. So I can still hear how my brain was saying, what's wrong with you? You should be up the front. What are you doing wrong? And so the brain discoupled from the throttle hand a little bit, and I went a bit too hard. And I went over this big peaking jump way too fast. And I went up, and the ground went down. And as I went up and the ground went down, I quickly saw how far from the ground I was. And some survival instinct said to me, you're not going to survive this if you stay on this bike. You got to get off it. So I kicked the bike away and hit the ground, and then I didn't remember no more. I woke up in hospital, and I came down from a great height, hit the ground really hard. And them days we wore leathers, not nylons, leather pants, and somewhere the bike hit the ground and then landed on me. And so I got twisted backwards, and then it landed me and broke my pelvis clean through both sides.
Wow.
And when I woke up, they'd cut my leathers off me, and I couldn't feel my legs. And I'm lying in the hospital, the Royal Brisbane Hospital, just here. And my brain's saying, this is not good. and my buddies were there because we drove there. I had an old black Rover, a P3 Rover, 6-cylinder thing, and a trailer on the back. And my buddies had obviously rescued that and brought it home. And there I am in hospital. The ambulance had taken me there. And I remember Dr. Blue come in, and he's poking at me with needles and that, and he's like, and I can't feel nothing, and he's jabbing my legs, and he says, well, son, you bloody motorcyclist, you never learn. I guess you just need to know you're never going to walk again. Just like that, he said it to me.
Far out.
And my brain went, what? And then I heard the old lady saying, don't ever say nothing but can't. There's no such thing as can't. And I said, bullshit, Blue. I said, I'll be walking, you just watch me. And I was very lucky. You know, the honesty of it, I think he was either exaggerating it or misdiagnosed or whatever you want to call it. It wasn't as bad as it seemed.
Right.
But because of the injury, there was no feeling. There was a lot of damage to my lower spine and my pelvis, and a lot of muscle damage around my hips. But I wasn't shattered, you know, so I still had nerves. And as the swelling went down, I started to get feeling again. I started to be able to wiggle my toes, move my feet. Mate, within a day or two in hospital, I can remember tearing the sheets up, wrapping around my leg and going like this all day long.
Right.
All day long, up and down, just like a madman, lifting my legs up and down. And Blue would come in, and he'd see me doing this. You're mad. And I just, you've heard my story. I'm focused. I've got to get them wheels going, I've got to get them legs working so I can get back on my bike. And I said to him, as soon as I can walk, I can get out of here, right? Is that the deal? Yeah, because he thought that was pretty funny.
Yep.
As soon as I can walk, I can get out. And I just kept hearing it, and I'd be all night. And, of course, they're whacking pethidine in me because, man, I was in pain. It was painful.
And so this technique that you're doing, did they say that would help you, or you've just gone in your head, this is this is going to give me movement, it's going to give me strength, I'm just going to do it.
I'm just going to do it. My legs aren't working.
Yeah.
I need to make them work.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to do it. And he said, what are you doing that for? I said, I'm doing it. I'm working on it.
Yeah.
And so I would pull it up and lower it down, and then I'd do the other one.
Yeah.
And eventually I'd pull up and try and stop it from falling down.
Yep.
And slowly got to the point where I could nearly stop it, So I said to him, I'm nearly able to stop my legs. Where's my crutches? I need some crutches. I remember him looking at me laughing, thinking, who's this lunatic? And sure enough, somehow I swindled the girls or something. I got some crutches. And it was only a matter of days. I just can't believe it when I look back, because I'm still actually probably officially registered in Ward 2B or whatever it was, because I just left. As soon as I could, my sister come in one night, Julie, one of my stepsisters, hey, go, come in to see me. I said, Blue said, as soon as I can walk on these crutches, I can go. Let's go.
Yeah.
And off we went. We got out of the ward as quick as I could. I got halfway down the hall and I had to stop. I was dizzy and I was going to faint, and I'm thinking I should go back. No, I'm out of here. I'm out. I was just so determined I'm going home. And I got home and, oh, man, was I in pain. But I was going forward. I wasn't going backwards for anybody. And I was lucky. I was really lucky. It obviously wasn't as bad as he first thought. So it was only a few short months and I'm back home.
Still a major psychological challenge for a young man to get over, to be told, oh, you're never going to walk again. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
It's a massive thing to then have the courage and the determination to go, well, stuff it, I'm going to do this leg exercise and I'm going to get back, and in a couple of months I'm going to be home. It's a huge thing, mate.
I couldn't roll over. I had to lay on my back. It hurt like hell. I'd yell out for the pethidine now and again, and I'd endure it until it hurt too much, but I kept lifting them legs.
Yep.
And that wasn't helping the pain, but it was helping making them work. In my brain, it was going to make them work. So I got home and on my crutches, and the old man and my stepmum thought I was a bit of a nutter. And I still haven't seen my mum. She's in South Australia with my sisters, so we're now 6-7 years I haven't seen them. And so I wobble downstairs as soon as I can, and I fixed this crashed up motorbike the boys have brought home, and she was a bit of a mess. My brand new RM125B, she's wrecked. But anything's fixable. So in between laying down and reading Lord of the Rings and reading Wilbur Smith and listening to Dire Straits when I just couldn't move, and I had to do something I never wanted to do, because the old man, he was a worker, so you had to be a worker, son. You have to pay rent. So when I was at home, as soon as I was working, I was paying board. And I'm talking like $30 a week. That's a lot of money when you earn 60 or 70, but that's what I had to do.
Yeah.
So now I'm broken and I can't earn $30 a week. I had to go on what they called the dole. And I just didn't want to do that. I wanted to be working as quick as I could. I felt really embarrassed that I would have to ask for a handout. As far as I was trained, I looked after myself. But the old man and my stepmom, there was no forgiving insofar as that you broke. You fell off the bike, you bugger. So you gotta fix it. So I did. I fixed the bike. I kept paying rent. And while I was fixing it, I went over to this Yamaha store and met a bloke over there called Rob Asink. Turned out he was an ex-world champion racer, had no fingers on his hand, because in his world champion days he'd fallen off and ground his fingers off. Really determined bastard, but still learned how to ride a motorbike. Wow. And this bloke became my mentor. And he just used to think, who is this bloke? Because somewhere in amongst all that, I sold the RM125. No, actually, I apologise. No, I still had it, but somewhere in there, I think I sold something I had, and I bought another little motorbike so I could ride. So
the accident obviously didn't deter you at all from going, like, this is the path I want to go down. You seem like a very headstrong bloke that this is the path that I'm doing, and I'm going to do it, even though I've got a fractured hip and I'm busted up, I'm still going to keep pushing forward.
It's just a setback. Got to go forward. So I would get on. I bought this little TL125 for not a lot of money, second-hand from somewhere, and I would hobble up to it on my crutches, get on it and start it, put the crutches under my butt and sit on it and ride it, and it was road registered. And I would ride it over to the Yamaha store and get these bits and pieces and bring it back and fix the RM. Got to know this bloke, and so my first race back was Toowoomba in 78.
How long after the crash was this?
6 or 8 months.
Yeah, right.
Not long, really. And I was carrying a lot of pain, and it was beautiful to go swimming, because when I wasn't in load, it didn't hurt, you know. Just laying in bed at night, it would hurt. It was painful. But I deliberately decided I wasn't having painkillers. I didn't want to do that. So I just figured I'll get better. I went to chiropractors. I went to physios, trying to work on this pain and the injury. And I went to Toowoomba, and I was still on crutches, my first race back. And Rob Asink happened to be there. And I didn't really know that I've got a vague memory that I knew he was there, but didn't really think too much of it, you know. So I'm on the starting line. I'm still C grade. I haven't won enough races yet. Now I've been knocked out for 6 or 8 months. Bam. And I did something I was good at. Pulled the whole shot. First out of the first corner. But I can't walk without crutches, mind you. And I'm in front of the racetrack, and I'm in front of the 30 or 40 other riders.
So did you have to hobble it? So someone have your bike at the start line and you've hobbled over on your crutches. You must have looked like a bloody madman from people watching
Cool.
on.
Yeah.
Here's this bloke on crutches walking over to this dirt bike and he's just about to
Yeah.
race.
And Rob Assink was one of those people. He said to me later, he said, I just watched and thought, God, this guy doesn't know what the word no means.
Yeah.
So that on the bike, sitting on the starting line, 1 foot down, you know, so I don't need the crutches now. They took the crutches away, black. First one out of the first corner. But of course I hadn't been able to run and train, so I'm not fit. So I've lasted about 2 laps and I've just flamed out, you know.
Yeah.
Arms are like jelly and everyone's passed me. I come back into the tent feeling good, but feeling knackered. And Rob walks over and he says to me, "Geez, you don't know how to quit, do you?" I said, "Well, I don't recall exactly, but anyway." He said, "Come and have a look at this." And he took me over and he had a brand new YZ125E with gold rims and a no dive and it's the latest suspension. And it was like my eyes lit up because my old RM125B, she's not old, but she's been crashed and I fixed her. And he says, you want to ride that thing for me next weekend?" I just couldn't believe my ears. It was like music to my ears. I said, "Really?" And that was my sponsorship. He gave me that bike and I rode for Rob for 6 years. And he got the money for me from Yamaha. Initially, he paid for the bikes. And then once I got to A grade, Yamaha paid for the bikes.
So how does that sponsorship work then? Because obviously if you're not winning a lot of money, and it sounds like it's a sport and a league back then where there isn't a lot of money to be had, even if you're at the highest level. How was that sponsorship working? What was he getting out of it? Was he getting anything out of the deal?
Well, if I got to wind the clock back a bit, when I crashed the bike, I was living at the Gap. I'd moved to the Gap in Brisbane, and from working at the Dinmore Meatworks and living at Arachula, and my job at the Gap was on a farm. There was a lettuce farm there, small crop farm. So I was a farmer. I knew how to. So I was growing lettuces, shallots, radishes, parsley, and of course, when I've come home and I can't work, I got to get the dole. I got the dole for 2 weeks, so I couldn't cope. And I went back to me boss, Ray Dipple. The Dipple family owned the farm there, and I said that because Ray had, things were tough in them. You can't work, mate. Too bad. See ya. Come back when you can. And I went to Ray and I said, "Can you put me on light duties?" So I used to sit on the tin and work in the lettuce farm, and he paid me half because I was a halfer.
Yeah.
I got half whatever I was getting paid when I was working. So I was back working.
But you still did that opposed to just getting the welfare and the dole.
Yeah, 2 weeks I took it for, and I just couldn't cope with it. So I'm back working for the Dipple family. And so that's what's funded me, fixing the bike and getting to the Toowoomba racetrack. And now Rob, he had a store called Gathon Yamaha near the Dipples in Mitchelton, and I'm living at the Gap. So it's all close on that western side of Brisbane. And when he offered me to ride his bike, I was still working for the Dipples and serving fuel in a fuel station on the weekends, pumping fuel and fitting tyres. And so I'm got another new job doing brakes on cars.
Yeah.
And so I rode for Rob for a little while on that bike, and I just won, and I won, and I won. I went from C grade to B grade to A grade pretty quickly. And because I had a really good bike, I had a mechanic and a tuner, and I had a goal in life, and that was I don't drink no more. I still drove a bit too fast on the road because that's what we all did. But all of a sudden, I tried to stop swearing. I tried to clean up my act. I thought, some bloke is backing me with his money, so I'm giving it back to him 110%. So I did, and he sorted me out. He never told me to do any of these things. I just had the wisdom to know to thank him. And so I'm riding his bikes. I'm working at the Dipples. And so that meant that because he would do a lot of the work on the bike, but I had to help. So I'd come in there at night. I'd finish the farm and I'd go down there to the Yamaha store, which wasn't far away, and then we'd wash the bike on Monday, and then we'd pull the chains off and we'd pull them all apart and we'd prepare it for next weekend. So we'd work 2 or 3 nights till 10, 11 o'clock at night getting the bike ready. Then in the morning I'd get up, and by now I was able to run, walk, and so I started running and try and get fit because you saw what happened to me in Toowoomba. I wasn't fit. I couldn't. So I started to train. So I'm going to get fit. And I recognised that was going to help me with my hips. So I went from one end of the scale to the other. I became one of the fittest blokes out there. I just got determined to be fit and run and train and push-ups. And in them days, we got this book called How to Be a Serious Motocross Rider. We bought it out of Europe. There was nothing. We joined this place called the Heartbeat Centre over here. And they went over and They put you on and they tested your heart and you ran. I got on a runner machine. I get my heart
Yeah.
up to 210, you know, and I look back and think, God, man, bloke was crazy. And so I trained and I trained and I trained for this fella because he was paying for my bikes, and he would pay the entry fee. He would sort the bike out and I'd show up and ride it.
Right.
And somewhere in that period, I transitioned from being a farmer because I went back on a full wages
Yep.
on the lettuce farm. I transitioned from doing that to Rob said, why don't you come work in the store? So the sponsorship was, by today's standards, nothing. But by those standards, it was very special because every other kid I'm racing against, his mum and dad are buying the bike.
Yep.
I've got a bloke buying my bike. So I've got this bloke who's very generously paying for me bikes. And year one, I had a 125. Year two, I had a 125. And then he said to me, have a go at that 250. And I rode the 250 really well. So he said, I'll get you one of those. Next thing, I've got a 125 and a 250. So I have to be fit now because I get off this bike, I wheel it in because we had a little tent in them days. That was pretty special, a little Yamaha tent. Pull in, rip this helmet and gear off, this shirt off, put a clean one on. He'd have the 250 ready, jump on taxi on the line, blat, and I'd go again. So I'd ride 125 and I'd ride 250. And so I progressed from C grade to A grade over a 12 or 18 month period, which was pretty quick. Met a lot of people, and Yamaha were initially only sponsoring a couple of guys like Steve Gall, who's a good friend of mine. He's 5-time Mr. Motocross. He was the number one guy in Australia. Right. And Anthony Gunter was Suzuki. And then up here in Queensland was a guy called Andrew Bailey. And he was number one. And he rode for Annan and Thompson Yamaha. They paid for his bikes. And then I was like second fiddle to him. Right. Rob paid for my bikes. So Rob eventually convinced A&T that he would create a team. So he took in Andrew and myself. And then A&T, Annan and Thompson, got the money, the bikes out of Yamaha and funded us. And that was really modern in that time, you know. And we were, at that time, we were racing out in the paddock. It was outdoor motocross. When I first started riding, it was called scrambles. You burn around a paddock, you know, and that's they mark it off and it slowly became motocross.
Was there a lot of spectators and stuff at that time?
Standing right there, and you'd sometimes nearly hit them.
Right.
You know? Yeah, there was sometimes big crowds.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. You'd go.
Right.
We raced Mullaney, Conondale, Kilcoy, Lismore, Harvey Bay, Bundaberg, Cairns, Mackay. Then we'd go down to Adelaide, to Sydney some weekends, Granville, those places. So we'd drive down on a Saturday, race on the Sunday, and then drive home Sunday night to be back because I had to be at work Monday morning.
Wow.
So you drove all night, you raced all day. And it was there that I met a guy called Blair Shepherd. Amazing man. So I was very fortunate. I'd met Rob Asink, who was an ex-world champion, no fingers on his hand, but he could still ride a motorbike, and he knew how to push himself. He was a really hard man, you know, and he's still going, Rob, still amazing bloke, and I know all his family because they grew up, and there are some that say he was too hard. He was very tough on himself and tough on everyone else. He was tough on me, and there was good and bad in that. Then I met Blair Shepherd through his son. His son was riding bicycles because Blair is Mr. BMX. He brought the bicycle motocross into Australia, brought the very first tough wheels and BMX bikes into Australia.
Right.
And he did that because his son wanted to ride BMX because they'd been to America and seen it. And Blair had made his money out of cars. He was a car dealer here at Bowen Hills.
Yeah.
He had the biggest car yard in Brisbane. But Blair was a really famous speed car driver. He used to be Black 99, him and Ron Wanless and those guys, the Black Offenhauer cars. And Blair was the fastest of the fast, and no one could beat Blair. He was a world champion speed car driver.
Right.
So he knew how to go fast, but he was a brilliant man. And I just took him like a duck to water. I just loved this guy's attitude to life. No such thing as can't. Positive, friendly, do anything. And so he was supporting his son. And then there was Andrew and I riding for Yamaha. And then next thing, this young fella called Scotty Shepherd joined us. Scotty was just 16, a junior, and hell fast on a little motorbike. He was riding the 125. By now I was riding 3 classes, 125, 250 and 500.
Right. All in one night. So you've gone from Toowoomba where you can't actually finish a race to now riding three different classes.
And that happened over 2.5 years or so. And Blair's he's a dynamo. He's been to America and he's seen all this different stuff going on. and he's met a guy called Mike Goodwin, and he ran the LA Coliseum, the first Super Bowl of motocross held inside the LA Coliseum. And so Blair's seen that, and he's come home with stars in his eyes, and his son's in it. Let's do this. And Blair's still alive, and he's still as friggin' dynamic as he was when he was 30 or 40, and he's just about 90 now, the old bugger. Let's do this, boys. So he was good mates with Ronnie Wanless, and Ronnie Wanless owned the Archerfield Stadium where they drove the cars round in circles. So Blair convinced Ronnie to let us put a motocross track inside, and they called it Supercross. So we've gone from scrambles to motocross to Supercross. We built this track out of deco. Holy shit, did it hurt when you fell off on it. Ground the hell out of my hands. Oh, my fingers, just mashed my fingers and broke my wrist, falling off. I can remember having a broken wrist and going to the doctor, and he put plaster on me. I've got home and I've cut it off because I'd heard of this stuff called hexalite, which is heat sensitive. Get it in the hot water, wrap it up. She's good. Leave it till Saturday night, put it in the hot water, take it off, and then ride Sunday, then put it back on Sunday night with broken wrist, But they were fractures, not major breaks.
Yep.
So again, I was lucky. At the time, I was lucky. I had broken fingers. I raced one event. My girlfriend, who's now my wife, Julie, spraying it with this icing stuff on the starting line to try and numb it so I could ride. I smashed the finger in a crash. Just determined. Anyway, Blair, we put this Archerfield Stadium together and we raced the stadium Supercross. And that would have been 79. So now I've been riding these things for a couple of years. Scotty's there, he's fast. Andrew's fast. There's some good young fellas come along. And my boss, my major sponsor, Rob Asink, ex-road racing guy. So I'm surrounded by some really good people. And I don't drink no more. I haven't had a drink for a couple of years.
And are these blokes the same as that? They encourage that? They're all like that. They understood.
Some of the boys would have a few drinks, but generally we were pretty clean. Definitely no drugs. Just no. I never, ever saw it at all.
Yep.
I do recall once someone flashed some marijuana in front of me and I thought, so I thought I'll try it. I do recall that. I had a couple of puffs and it made me feel really weird. So I had 2 or 3 puffs. And I can clearly remember what happened on the Sunday. I rode like an old chook, and that made it really clear to me. That messed with my judgment.
Right.
I ain't going near that stuff ever again, and I never did. That was my whole encounter. So Blair was a dynamo, and boys, we're going to put a motocross track in the middle of the Sydney Showground, the hallowed grounds of the Sydney Showground. We're going to put a Supercross track in there. So down there we went, and we did. We had semi-trailers up into the stands and back out, and we had this Bobcat working in there, a guy called Peter Barnes building these tracks, and because they all thought Blair was going to go on his ass. He paid, I forget the family, I think a Horden family, whoever owned or controlled the stadium at that time. He paid him, he put his money up front. Blair was big balls, gutsy. He was a promoter from the raw form. Put his money up, paid, brought a couple of Americans out. 35,000 screaming fans filled that stadium that night, and Blair made good money.
Wow.
And it was the most amazing event, and I won my event in there that night. I'd gone badly on the first couple because it was the American system where it was, heats and then the main.
Yeah.
And I won a race in there, and it was just like nothing you ever saw. You go in and you can hear these 35,000 people screaming. The funny thing, the event that I won, I had to. This guy was in my one. Track was narrow. I had to get a bit aggressive. Ended up banging into him to get him out of my way because he was holding me back. And obviously, he was a New South Wales boy and he had a few in the crowd. So I finished the race. I'm riding around waving till I got to where his mates were. I got hammered by all these cans, these cool cans. So obviously, I'd upset someone.
But that's a huge thing. Like obviously, motocross and supercross and all that is such a big thing now. And you can go to any stadium. Yeah. All the time, but to be that first big one at the showgrounds, the Sydney Showgrounds,
it was awesome.
Have the guts and the balls to go, right, I'm going to do this. That's a big pioneering thing for that sport here in Australia, especially.
Yeah. He was a legend, and so then he did the same thing in the Brisbane Showground, the RNA Showground it was called, and we did that. We helped him set up, and there he had a mate who had earth moving machinery and his name was Barry, and he had a daughter called Julie, and so that's where I met Julie. She was 15, and by now I'm like 20.
Yep. And
so we're hanging out a bit on the track, and we just saw a movie of her the other day. It is the funniest thing because she'd been riding the bicycles, and she's like a yobbo girl. We laughed our heads off. We showed it to the girls, and anyway, she's hanging out, and here's me and Scott and Andrew, and we're the boys, you know.
You must have been looked pretty cool there, though, mate. You're on the motorbike. You got sponsorship. You've just won the big race in Sydney. You know,
you done all right. Yeah, but,
you're all right.
but the funny thing is, I wasn't a womanizer.
Yeah.
I'm happy to admit that I wasn't a womanizer. Just that wasn't what was driving me.
Yeah.
So I wasn't drinking. I wasn't smoking. I wasn't womanizing. I was just working.
Yep.
And I got to say, the pain I saw with my mum and dad, I was a one girl bloke.
Yep.
I knew that's how I was going to be, and there was going to be no failing in my marriage. That was burned in the back of my brain in raw vision. Once I said yes, that was going to be it. There was nothing was going to change that. So somewhere in that window, I decided to go and find me mum.
Right.
So it was Christmas time, and my old mate Chucker Maxwell, that was his nickname. We got in this old XW Falcon, and we rocked down to South Australia and went to the post office, and I'm asking around because I know I've heard something through aunties and stuff that she's got married. She's now got a son who's actually my brother. I've never met him.
Yep.
She's living down Morford Vale way. So I've gone to post office and I've tracked her down. Me and Chucker have rocked in there. And I've gone to this address and I've knocked on the door and she's opened the door and here I am. I've got long hair at this point in time.
Jeez, you are a real catch at the time, mate.
Bit of a lad, you know.
Yeah,
Didn't have a mullet though. And so she opens the door and I rub it into her, or I did for a while, but I've stopped doing it now. Yes, sir, can I help you? And what do you reckon I said? Typical shit. You don't even recognise your own son. And she burst into tears.
Jeez.
And it was an emotional moment. You know,
Well, you would have only been a boy when you last saw
little kid.
Little kid, and now you're this motorbike wearing, leather suited, long haired man come rocking in
with a station wagon with a mattress in the back.
Yeah.
Only for me to sleep in because I didn't have the money to pay for a motel. So we hung out there. I met my brother. Her husband come home and it turned downhill real fast. He didn't want me in the place.
Right.
And so I tried. I had no plan except to go and see my mum and try and reconnect. And I'd seen one of my sisters whilst I was there somewhere during that, and it was obvious that Chucker and I weren't welcome there, so we just got in the car and left. And by now the old man's moved again, and he's moved back to Rosebud with my stepmum. He's left the gap, and I've said, see ya.
So this has been quite a bigger trip down in South Australia. For people that don't know, South Australia and Queensland, they're not, especially back then when the roads are different, it's not an easy drive to get down there. It's across the whole country to get there.
So you got to remember, we were racers. So you know what we did? Everywhere we went on the watch. Who could get there quicker? We did 17 hours, 15 minutes in about 1978 or 79 through Broken Hill to Adelaide, and next trip we're going to do it quicker. That's how we thought. And it was dangerous and stupid. But that's what we did. You went fast as you could. There wasn't too many radars around. And so we left there, clearly not welcome. Mum had tears, met my little brother, he's only a little baby, quite young. Went to Adelaide, to Rosebud, saw the old fella. By now he had a cement truck, Dad being Dad, he's always working, he's buying a flower farm, he's doing something, he's working, he's got his new wife, and he gives me the news that she's got cancer, and it's not pretty. And my sisters are all down there, my stepsisters, my blood sisters, and my half-brother are in Adelaide. And so I'm a bit strong-willed about, I'm sick of this moving, mate. I'm sick of all this bullshit. I'm making a life in Adelaide. See you later. In Queensland. See you later. I'm going back. I've got sponsorship. I feel like I've got something.
Yep.
Like I'm, up to that point, I'd been feeling like things were pretty tough. So I've come home to Queensland. I'm renting a house. And it's funny, the links and the traps. And so a buddy I've met in the racetrack, his name's Michael Groom. If you Google him, you'll see he's Australia's most accomplished mountaineer. But at that time, he was 17 or 18. I was 17 or 18. And, of course, I got to rent a house. And he's a racer. He's a C grader. When I'm a C grader, I've kept going. I think he got to B grade or something. And we're racing. And I'll go your halves and rent a house. I need a house, because the old man's moved back to Adelaide, back to Rosebud. So Mike and I rented a house. And Mike's story is insane.
Yeah, right.
It's a story you got to know.
Yeah, right.
He's a professional speaker these days. He was the fourth person on the planet to climb the 4 highest mountains without oxygen.
Right.
I remember him coming home one night and saying, Pete, I'm going to climb Mount Everest. And I just said, you're crazy. And he said to me just the other day, he said, you know what you said to me? I said, no. He said, you told me you're going to go and learn to fly airplanes. He climbed Mount Everest and I learnt to fly airplanes. Well, he did it, the fourth person on the planet. But what's amazing about Mike is he's the only one ever that did it with no feet. Because on his first 8,000er, he got stuck, got frostbite, lost his feet, and he was told he'd never walk again.
Bloody
and
hell.
He struggled a lot harder than I did. He walks now with orthotics, and he's climbed the 4 highest mountains without feet. No one else has ever done that.
Wow.
Amazing human being.
Incredible.
And when he's not climbing mountains, because he's just done El Capitan, we're the same age, we're 60 now, all these years later. When he's not climbing mountains or when he's not speaking, because he's a professional speaker, he works on Lady Eliot because in them days he was a plumber. So he just loves being out on the island and working. He loves the place.
I understand that, mate. Every time I'm out there, I go, maybe I could just come and work behind the bar or something for you. Stay out here a little bit longer.
So Groomy and I were buddies in that period of time when I was riding. That was in the early window of time when I was riding for Yamaha. Mike came into my life, and little did we know we'd still be mates all these years later. And he was one of those people that in the This Is Your Life program, he was over in Yosemite doing El Capitan. So Julie got him to sit in front of a thing and do a story. And he said, Pete, we were so similar. There was one thing about you and I that was very different. He said, I was very introverted and I didn't like to speak, and you just talk everyone's ears off. And I guess that's bloody true, I don't mind having a yarn.
I haven't noticed, mate. I haven't.
But I do get, anyway, so amazing fella. And I've got to say to you, if you want to interview an interesting bloke, but you'll have to pull it out of him. But man, can he tell you a story?
I would love to.
And he's so humble. I have to jab him sometimes. You might recall in '96 when Rob Hall died.
Mm-hmm.
And Scotty Fisher died on the mountain.
Yep.
One of Rob Hall's guides came down alive, but he died on the night. But he came out. They got him back to life, and that was Mike.
Right.
So he's written his own book, and his story is.
Well, I'll get the name of the book off you and stuff after this. We'll write it down before you go, and I'd love to read it, and I'd love to get him on a chat because he sounds like an absolutely brilliant.
Called Sheer Will. I'll send you a copy because they're no longer in print.
Please.
So anyway, here we are. Where'd we get to? We're
just moved in with him.
Yeah, So he and I had lived together for a few years. We rented a couple of different houses in amongst this period of, because sponsorship today is some young fella getting lots of money.
Yeah,
sponsors in them days. You had to work, you had to pay for everything, but you got your bike paid for, your fuel, your entry fee, and it got really good. Eventually, we got Eldorado or AGV or someone to pay for our helmets or our nylons or our gloves, And it just felt like you were bloody 6 foot tall. That someone was paying. But there was obviously blokes that were better than me that were getting more than that.
Yeah.
Steve Gall would have obviously been getting a lot more. Gunner. There was the guys who were the Australian champions. I remember I was just in the Queensland scene and trying to push myself up. So I was in the top 2 or 3 in Queensland, 4 or 5, something like that. And now and again I'd go good in the Australian events, but I wasn't quite at that level.
Yep.
And I was fairly perceptive, and I started to see that. And Rob was a great mechanic, but his world was road racing.
Right.
Throughout this window, we had this young fella rock in the door now and again, riding a motorbike for an old mate that was looking after him, that reckoned he was pretty handy. His name was Mick Doohan.
Right.
And Mick would come in and we would tune his bikes. And then Rob would tune them and then I'd get on them. And I wasn't a road racer, but I could ride a motorbike on the road. So I'd go and Rob would say, go and ride that. Tell me what can you get out of that? And I'd go down to Sanford at 300 kilometres an hour on that road, mate.
Wow.
So I got it to 310.
On that Sanford road, the main road. That's not an easy road to drive.
Ridiculous things we did. Just ridiculous. And then I'd go out to Lakeside and we'd ride him. And this Mick Doohan kid was fast. And I could see Rob was looking at him thinking, man, he could see he's a world champion here. Pete's never going to be a world champion. And Pete could see that. I was enjoying it. I was having fun. But I was not him. And so through that window, we're talking about a 5 or 6 year window, we did the internal stadium events. I met Julie. And then one summer, because summer was when racing stopped. Right. Blair Shepherd and his son Scott and I have become really close friends. And I won't go into it too much, but I bought my first house with help from my dad and my stepmum and my stepsister. I was really focused on making a bob because I needed some money to go ahead in life. I wanted to buy a house. So I bought my first house with help from dad and mum after Mike went off wanting to climb mountains at about the age of, might have been just 21. And I did a deal with the old man. I said, you fund it. Julie and I'll put up a deposit. We'll make the payments. And then when we sell it, we'll split the profits. And my mum was sick. She had cancer. So, yeah, we did that. We sold it and there was a profit, but I didn't see my share. And that was pretty hard for me and Dad, but he had to keep the peace. And you got to remember, he had nothing when he met her. So, you know, so I found the first pain of a deal that didn't work with your family, and that really hurt.
So the family kept the money? Is that what happened?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, because it was in his name.
Right.
We just got a handshake deal.
Right.
And so I thought, well, I'm going to get ours somehow. So, and I was, the Pete focus, I want to buy my own place. So I got a credit card for $1,000.
Right.
And I went and I got $1,000 cash advance. And I walked into the bank next door and I says to the manager, I've got $1,000 I've saved up here. How much will you loan me?
So what, you've got a credit card, taken the money out, walked in the bank next door and said, hey, I sort of...
Literally.
Wow.
And I bought a block of land for $8,000. I managed to get a $7,000 personal loan off that bloke because I'd saved up $1,000, but I didn't. I had no money because everything's in your car and your bike and whatever else. And so I bought a block of land. And meantime, this house that I'd sold was my home, and so my home's gone. So I moved in with the Shepherds, and that was where Blair really taught me about human values. Really brilliant human being. Him and his beautiful wife Merle and his family. And he was a wealthy man because he'd made a lot of money in his life. And so I lived there at Hamilton on a house on the hill, which Christopher Skase had opposite. And it was like, wow. Because I'd come...
a nice suburb. Really nice
seriously.
Suburb. Yeah.
And I'd come from humble background with not a whole lot. And then I've seen this and I've gone, I want to be like this bloke. I want to learn how to do better. But still in the back of my head is this leave something for us kid, this don't have rabbit traps kid. So Blair took me in a boat. We're going away for Christmas, son. We're going to the Great Barrier Reef. We went up past Fraser Island, and he had his mate with him, Barry, and he had his daughter with him, Julie. We came to this little island called Lady Eliot Island, and it's Christmas, 80. And Scotty and I swam ashore, wobbled across there on these sharp rocks, hardly any trees, generator going, an A-frame. People were out diving, who knows where they were. No people around. It was a very inhospitable place. And we had a bit of a snorkel there, and then we jumped in the boat and we went to Lady Musgrave Island. Musgrave had a beautiful forest, and Lady Eliot was windswept and barren, like a desert. But Julie was a scuba diver, and I'd only just had to learn how to work a snorkel. So while we're there in Musgrave, she's down on the bottom with a scuba tank on her back, and I'm up on the surface looking down and smiling at her.
Right.
So I snorkel down to her. Hi. She pulls the thing out of her mouth and shoves it in my mouth, the reg. Oh, that's pretty good. She probably wants this back, give it back to her. Did a bit of this for a couple of times. Better go up. And that was kind of the beginning of her and I becoming a partnership.
Right.
And I went and learned to dive in that coming year or so, and kept thinking about Lady Eliot and Lady Musgrave, kept thinking about the Barrier Reef, and then I started to see a vision. Aeroplanes and boats and the Great Barrier Reef, and then I saw this island that was really badly damaged, and I saw this other one that was lovely and green, and I started to, as I've done all my life, see visions and use my imagination and try and bring it together. What am I going to do when I quit racing? Because I knew where Rob was going, and I knew he wanted to look after this young fella doing. I just knew that's what he wanted to do. And so in 82, one of the Suzuki boys quit racing. They were our opposition. His name was Stewie McLaughlin. Stewie was the fastest guy you ever saw, wildest bloke you ever saw, and he quit Suzuki, come and seen me, had a yarn, had a laugh. Give me a ride on that bike. And he rode my 250, which was Rob's, and rode it fast. And we were about the good of the team.
Yep.
It's not about Pete. It's about Yamaha wins, then Yamaha's happy, we're all happy. And God, Stewie could ride that bike. And I remember saying to him, geez, mate, what are you quitting for? You're 21 or 22, whatever he was. We were only young fellas. You should be riding Yamahas. I said, if I could get you a bike, will you come back in? Maybe. So I went straight to Rob, and he went down and Tom said, let's get him a 250. So we got Stewie a brand new 250, and he got on a Yamaha. And that was January 82. And yeah, January 82 it was, I'm pretty sure. Stewie was fast and he was wild. And I was really pleased because that meant our team was stronger. So Yamaha was going to be stronger. I knew Stewie was going to kick my butt. You know, I knew I could ride well, but I wasn't in his league. Occasionally I would beat him, but mostly he had a skill I didn't have. But I was big enough to accept that and do my best and hope I would grow. You got to remember, these kids had been on motorbikes living in one town all their life, and that's all they did. Pete's done all sorts of bloody stuff. So he hasn't got much time, and besides that, he's busted his pelvis, so he's got limits. So Stewie and I are deciding to ride our 250s. It's January 82. Scotty's on his 125, Scotty Shepherd. At that time, we're Team Yamaha. We go to Bundaberg. It's January 82. Piss and rain. Big long main straight on the track. Big long main straight, like 90 mile an hour stuff. Big hollows and dips, and it's full of water. And it's the open class. Open class means ride whatever you like.
Yep.
So there's 500s, there's 250s and 125s. And we went out on that track, tear-offs on. Tear-offs meaning when you get mud on your face, you rip them off. And I can still remember how it happened. Full bore, scream over the ridge, down into this hollow. There's a couple of 500s, like half a bike in front of us. I can still see it. Stewie's right there out of my peripheral. A couple of big 500s. We're right there. There's 4 of us, bang, into this hole. Whack, we get hit by the mud. Somehow or another, I've gone whack, got my tear-off gone, so I can see again. Like in a moment, I've just grabbed the tear-off. And Stewie's not there anymore. Now I'm third. There's 2 500s and then me coming out of the corner. Did a lap, come back around, and sometimes you just know. I came back around to that hole where Stewie disappeared out of my sight, and I could see Stewie's bike, Scotty's bike, and a big crowd of people, and I just pulled over. And I watched Stewie die there, and it was just horrible because he was such a strong bloke. He tried to get up. Scotty come into the mud, didn't see him, hit him in the back. And he died. And we watched him die. Fuck, it hurt. But I didn't cry then. I just went home. We packed up and we went home. We raced for maybe a year. Then I gave it away. I just said, I knew I was never going to be as good as him and Mick, and so I just said to Rob at the end of that year, mate, you need to take doing overseas. He's, you know, and I know he's world champion material. Stop wasting your time with me. My heart's not in this anymore. I want to do other things. And it really upset Scotty. It upset me. We hung in there. We did a year or so, somewhere into 83, and but yeah, my spirit wasn't there the same. And I think about him a lot. He's in a photo on my wall.
Right.
And what's amazing about him is a guy that would swear every second word, and he was as rough as hell. He wrote a poem just before he died, which would just bring tears to your eyes. And his girlfriend read it at the funeral, and none of us could believe Stewie wrote it. And we still don't. And only last week, I had a group of people out at the island, and I was telling a bit of a story, a little bit of my story, much abbreviated on this. And I said, a mate died, and he come over to me later and he said, well, that wouldn't have been Stuart McLaughlin, would it? And I said, did you know Stuart? And he said, I paid for his first bikes. I said, then you need to send me your email and I'll send you a poem that Stewie wrote. And he said, Stewie never wrote a poem. I said, yeah, he did, mate. I sent him a photo of Stuart on my bike, my 250, when we were playing together, and the poem, and this guy was just knocked out, you know.
Wow.
So that was a long time ago. So anyway, so
it was enough for you to eventually give up and just say, like, this isn't for me.
Well, there was a host of things, mate. I had the wisdom to know that I was in pain when I rode a motorbike. It hurt. It hurt me in the hips. It hurt me in the back.
Yep.
And I'm still suffering from it. And I was smart enough to say, you keep doing this. It wasn't necessarily that I was going to die. It was that I was going to become less.
Yep.
And I wanted to do more. So Scotty and I struggled with the fact that he'd hit Stewie. But as I said, man, you didn't even see him.
Yeah.
If Stewie had laid there, he'd have gone clean over him. But Stewie's tried to get up, and Scotty's gone bam, you know. So It knocked the both of us around a lot, but we both kept going for a time. Then not long after that, Scotty crashed, same track, Bundaberg, and he ended up with, I remember looking at it, he had 2 elbows, busted his arm so clean.
Wow.
It came right angles, and he had metal bars, metal plates put in there. And I mean, he's an amazing young man, and he's raised some beautiful children, and his father's still Mr. BMX. They're called BMX Promotions. Scotty's got this amazing business. He's been importing bicycles into this country for 40 plus years. He runs that business. His dad's still around, amazing individual, beautiful human being. And, you know, we had that side of us, I think.
Yeah.
And so I give Rob the word that I was going to hang up my swag, and he just couldn't believe it. What do you mean? You've got everything you want. You've got Yamaha are going to give you 3 new bikes next year. And I just said, no, I don't want to. It wasn't immediately after the accident. It took time.
Yep.
And to recognise that and to see, because at that time Mick was riding for his mate Johnny McGilvray, and they had a thing called Team Camo, and the bike was all painted up in camo.
Right.
And McGilvray was a smart, good operator, a promoter, and McGilvray went with Mick. I don't know exactly the nature of what happened in the deal, how they did it, but I just quit, and I know they went to Europe, and Mick was Australia's best.
Yeah, so for those who don't know, Mick Doohan is Australia's greatest motorbike racer that we've ever had. He's an absolute legend. I don't follow the racing, so I can't tell you how many times he was world champion.
5 times.
5-time world champion. There you go. So he's a phenomenal Australian racer.
Yeah, and he broke his leg at some point in his time and should have lost his leg. Similar philosophy, no such thing as can't, because when he came home with his broken leg, by now I have aeroplanes and I'm flying Mick around now and again to his boat, and he's got this thing on his leg, mate, like an external frame to keep his leg together, because we're still buddies.
So still to this day, he's got that on his leg.
Oh, no, sorry. At that time he did, while his leg was healing.
Right.
Yeah. And I remember looking at that thing, Christ, because the bones, these things were screwed into the bones. It was externally framed to keep it straight. He found a doctor in Holland or something. They were going to take his leg off, but he wouldn't take no for an answer, and he found a doctor that saved his leg.
Wow.
Amazing. Just these guys have amazing stories. So from my perspective, I'm hanging up my swag on racing. I've met this young girl called Julie. I just remember one night saying to her, "Do you want to get married? If you marry me, you know it's going to be a bit of a ride." And I can't guarantee what's going to happen, but it's going to be fun. And I'm going to give away the racing, and we're going to go and make some money, and we're going to go and do some special stuff. And that was it. She said, yep. So February 84, 25th of February 84, we got married. She was just 19 and I was just 24.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's when we got married. And through that window of time, I'd been to Lady Eliot, I'd been to Lady Musgrave. I've actually, at some point in time, I've gone to Dunk Island with Blair in his boat, because Blair was good mates with a guy called Bob Dyer. Don't know if you ever remember Bob and Dolly Dyer, Picker Box.
I know the name Bob Dyer, but
Lee Marvin. These guys were mad keen game fishermen. They used to go and catch marlin.
Right.
And Blair was a marlin fisherman, loved it. So he took me out sometimes and I'd see that, and it was like, it was exciting to be on a big boat with these blokes with big fishing rods catching big fish, but it upset me.
I've done that a few times, marlin fishing.
Yeah.
Because we made a fishing show for a while, and it's exciting because there's adrenaline and you're in the reef and it's beautiful, but then you realise you're pulling up this incredible creature from the deep, and it might be released, it might not. It might be injured while you're pulling it up. It could be eaten by sharks when you're pulling up. So you're not doing anything good for a short, hours worth of entertainment or 2 hours worth of entertainment, whatever that fight is. You're putting that animal at such great risk, and to see that animal up close is phenomenal. When you see 1,000-pound marlin up at the back of the boat, or even a blue marlin when they get those neon things up the sides, like these are absolutely phenomenal creatures. So I hear you when you say there's an excitement and an experience to going marlin fishing, but there's also a cost to that animal, which is really tough to.
And not that I saw too much marlin, but I saw an awful lot of coral trout and stuff. Fish that had come up and then their belly would come out and they would die. And Blair was my hero and these guys were my heroes, but my brain was going bang, 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 bang. Yep. It was like the rabbit trap.
Yep.
And this kid, this conservationist in here, was starting to try and get out and the motorbikes were disappearing, and I still didn't have any money. Like, I didn't get out of motocross with any money. But in the way, I'd bought this block of land, you might recall, and I'd eventually put a caravan on it and lived in the caravan. No power, no water, no phone, no road even. My buddy towed it up. It was in the bush. I got it cheap. It was in the bush. He towed it up there with a drop, parked it there. And I lived in it with a gas fridge and a candle, and I'd heat the water on the stove and hang it on the tree and have a shower outside at night. And Julie's old man used to call me Peter the Pioneer, reckoned I was a loser. What's she doing hanging around with this loser? But I had a goal.
Yep.
If I pay that off and I pay that block of land off, I can sell it at a little profit, and then I can buy something a bit better, and I can pay that off, and I can sell a little profit, and I can buy something a bit better. And that's exactly what I did. Sold one, then I sold another one, and I slowly made money out of houses. And I won on about 90% of them. I got caught on a couple, but generally I did okay. And that was a time when real estate was booming.
Yep.
You know? And so Julie and I, we just did what we said. Let's get married, let's go to work. And work we did. And I just said to her, if we're going to get ahead, because her mum and dad had done well. They were hardworking people. Her mum's no longer with us, but her dad's still alive. Amazing man, taught me some remarkable things. He's a motor bodybuilder. He could build anything with his hands.
Right.
So in the time that after I finished racing, the first thing I did was went and worked for him, and we built things. He used to build all the ambulances and the fire trucks.
Right.
He taught me how to build things, taught me how to use your head and just visualize and build it. He could just build. This guy's a genius with his hands. And but he's a whole nother story, and he had an interesting childhood that led him to a place where we struggle with each other at this point in our lives. But we got into, my first job was just a lawnmower, pushing a lawnmower, wheel, whippersnipping, 10 or $15.
Yeah.
Building, I'd do someone's lawn, and because I was a Bob a Job kid, the Boy Scout. Can I do anything else for you, sir or ma'am? Yep. Could you fix that fence? Yep. Can you fix that? Yep. Can you cut that tree down? Yep. God, how am I going to do that? Go and get the chainsaw, buy a chainsaw. So I had a mower, then I had a chainsaw, and I had 2 chainsaws, and I started with out of the back of my car. Next thing I had a ute, then I had a little 3-ton truck, and had a few blokes working for me, just driving around the truck, fixing cutting trees down and cutting firewood. And I said to Julie, if we want to get ahead, we got to do 2 days work every day, and we got to do it 7 days a week. And she was working at the Brisbane City Council in the rates department. So on Saturday morning and Sunday morning, she'd get up at 3 or 4 in the morning with me, and she'd come to work. Because just before we got married, I picked up a cleaning contract for the Brisbane Forest Park up the back here. Cleaned all their toilets, cleaned all their rubbish bins, their firewood, picked up all the cigarette butts. And they had the government had 3 blokes doing this all day long, 3 days a week, cleaning these parks. And they decided to put it out to tender. So I got wind that it was Mount Nebo, and I was living up there at the time in my caravan. By now I had a generator and a shed over the top
Pretty
to catch
fancy,
the water.
mate.
Oh yeah, it was flash. And so I put in a bid, and my bid was tough because I reckoned I could do this in 4 hours. And these guys, I remember them quizzing me and saying, "How do you think you can do it in 4 hours?" So, because I'm going to run, because I'm pretty fit. I've been racing motocross. I run everywhere. So they actually followed me. They gave me the contract on a trial, and they watched me and they followed me. And then after about a week, they said, "Okay." And I signed up a 3-year contract because I would run with the rubbish bin on me back. I'd run into the toilets and I'd wash all the toilets. And I'd run out and I'd grab the bin. I'd run around, empty all the bins, and I'd run out with the fire and put it all out, and I'd clean the fires, and I'd pick up run around and pick up all the cigarette butts and hit the next place. I had a young kid, about 16 or 17 or 18, working for me, and he would drive the car to keep up with me, and I'd just run. And we'd get back in the car and we'd go into the next park. And it started with like 3 or 4 parks. By the end, I had 10 parks I was cleaning. And I'd start, and I just started earlier and earlier. It was the same as the old paper round thinking. I'll start earlier and I'd get finished. And I'd start at like 3 or 4, and I'd come home, and I'd be home 8 or 9, have a hot shower, get all the filth off me because I'd be filthy and stink. And I'd park that truck because she was pretty smelly because she was carting rubbish and stuff like that. And I'd get another truck, and then I'd go and cut firewood, or I'd go and cut trees down, I'd build a fence or mow their lawn. And that was my 2 days' work. And on the weekends, Julie come with me, and she would drive the truck if she had to. Or when I was cutting firewood, because in them days we didn't have the money for a block splitter, I'd cut the blocks, and I got $45 a tonne for blocks. But if I split them, I got 60.
Right.
With a hand wood splitter, I could split a ton of blocks in 20 minutes. So I got another $15 for 20 minutes. So I was always trying to sell it as blocks. A split. And I'd be splitting it, and she'd be picking up and throwing it on the truck
Wow.
on the weekends. And we'd start early. We'd do the parks, and we'd come home and have a shower and a bit of break, and then we might have 3 or 4 ton of wood ordered for Sunday delivery. No mobile phones in those days. I had a buddy that would take the calls, make the bookings, then he'd ring me and say, mate, you've got 4 tons to do on Sunday or Saturday or whatever it was. And Julie would come with me, and she'd throw the wood in the truck. And we'd put 3 ton in the truck, a little 3 ton tipper. Dog would get on the top, chainsaw would go back down the mountain, we'd come and deliver it. And sometimes we could do that twice on a weekend day too. And I'd hand split them, and man, was I fit and strong, you know, because I was swinging an axe.
So what time were you starting? Were you getting up at like 3 in the morning to get two loads done in a day?
I'm trying to remember exactly, but on Fridays we did the parks. Sunday and Monday we did the parks. So on Saturday we just did the firewood. Sunday we would do the parks, and we'd get home, depending on how busy it was, 8 or 9 o'clock, have a shower, and then we'd probably get 1 truckload done, 3 ton. But Saturday we might get 2 loads done, 6 ton. Good money. And then Monday to Friday, she was back at the council working, and I'd do Monday morning the parks, and I had a young fella driving, as I said, on Monday to Friday, and then I'd go and do something else, tree lopping, fence building. I built a lot of farming fences. I built a lot of post and rail ones. My dad come with me and taught me how to do it. Used a chainsaw, and we'd cut those old timber posts and rails and build them up. Did a lot of that up in Mount Nebo. And then barbed wire, and I bought some strainers. And the old man came and worked with me a bit and taught me how to do some of that. He came up for a while and just gave me a bit of a hand with that and taught me a bit of fencing that I hadn't learned.
You're not picking easy jobs, mate. Splitting timber and putting fences up aren't easy jobs. For anyone that hasn't done it, I don't recommend making a career choice out of it because it's bloody hard work.
And to make it worse, I learned early about a niche. So I knew that when you did it down in Sanford in the flat paddock, you got nothing per acre because the blokes would drive around with a tractor and drill a hole. But up on Mount Nebo, the country was too steep, so you couldn't have a tractor. So the only one way to do it was with a crowbar and a shovel. And you would line up the paddock from top to bottom. You'd line up the fence line using a couple of, like a stick with a couple of nails, and you'd line up, and your mate would be down, and you'd line it up, and you'd go down, and you would physically dig the holes by hand. Then you would try and unload the posts on the top of the hill so you could drag them down, but occasionally you couldn't, so you had to drag them up, then put them in the hole, then ram them, then drill them, then pull the wire through them if you were doing wire fencing. So I could charge more because no one else wanted to do it.
Yeah.
So I would build fences, no one wanted to do it.
That was tough.
So Pete was getting all the jobs that no one else wanted to do, but he could charge more. So I understood that, hey, the other guys don't want to do this, I'll do that. I'll let them do the tractor stuff. I eventually bought a tractor, but I hardly ever used it because I didn't want to do a fence for peanuts. I wanted to be reasonably paid because I knew how to work, but I wasn't frightened of using the crowbar and the shovel. So I'll finish racing now. We're doing this. And very quickly after I finished racing, my focus went onto the Southern Barrier Reef. How am I going to get there?
So were you still going out there? Were you still?
No, I'd only been there a couple of times.
You'd only been there a couple of times. It had burnt into your head that Peter Gash focus had kicked in where you've seen something you like the model plane or the motorbikes, and you kicked in with Great Barrier Reef. And for people that have never been to the Great Barrier Reef, it is phenomenal. The southern end where this island is, it's one of the islands on the very southern end of the Great Barrier Reef, and it is unbelievable. Yeah. If you want to do anything in your life, go there, go snorkeling. It was a different situation in 1980 or when you first went out there. Yeah. The island was barren. There was mining that happened 100 years before that, wasn't there? Yep. And it was all for the guano, for the bird poo out there. In the 1860s, I think. Yep. Correct me if I'm wrong.
You're good, mate. You're good.
Maybe I made a show about this place once or twice. It was mined for all the guano on the island, and so that meant all the trees were stripped off, and everything was pretty much left bare. So it was like you said, when you first saw the difference between Lady Eliot and the other next closest island, which was Musgrave, which had all the trees, this island was completely bare. That means the birds stopped coming out there. There was that cycle that starts with the island and trickles down into the reef. It started to die and stop. And then I believe it was in the mid-80s where someone took over the lease, or was it earlier?
The very first lease was put together. The airstrip was built in 69, 70 in the A-frame, and Don Adams was the fellow, and he's still alive, and he started to plant a few trees.
Right.
And that was the very first conservation effort. He brought out some conservation volunteers. He planted a few trees, and the birds started to return in the early 70s. So we, by no means did we do all the work. Don started it, then another guy behind him, Paul Harvey, then John French and Bevan Whitaker, and then myself and our team. So there's been a lot of work to get it to where it is, and I'm very much at pains when people say, you've done amazing. I go, yeah, well, thanks, but I've only built on what was done by others, I often say it's on the shoulders of giant seas, because it was tougher for these guys, They didn't have the numbers of people. I've had the fortune of good numbers of people, which means that there's a bit more money. Those blokes it was really thin for them. Tourism wasn't like it is today.
I think whenever you do anything and you're the first one to go, right, I'm going to go out to this island and get the contract and then try and bring it back to life, and you've got to set the trail, you've got to do stuff. So people like you and the people that came before you, and I'm sure the people that come after you as well, can start building on that trail and start going in, whether it's business, whether it's conservation like that. You always need that trailblazer to go through and get it done.
So Julie and I are doing all this work, and all of a sudden we haven't been going 5 minutes after our marriage when I decided I want to learn to fly. In fact, it was the very first year that we got married. Yeah, it was no more than 12 months. I started to make some money. I sold this property and this property. Next thing, we had quite a nice house here at Newmarket. Big old, what we called a one owner. It was built in the 1950s. Bloke and his wife had bought it, and they'd lived in it all their life, and he had died and she'd stayed on. It was way out of our price range. But it was a fantastic old Queenslander sitting on top of the hill at Newmarket, looked to the city, Mount Cootha, the Gateway Bridge, beautiful. And my friend's Blair Shepherd, and he taught me to think big and dream big, and I'm going to own that house somehow. So I sold my place at Mount Nebo, and I very bravely went into the bank, and I think we paid like 55 grand for it, we were looking for houses around 25 or 30, and we paid big money, but it was an amazing house. And because of my upbringing, we weren't living together till we were married. That's how I was. That's how I was, and that's how she was. And
so you weren't married at this time?
Not at the time I bought the house. I had my place on the mountain. We committed to a wedding, and we committed to buy a house. We went looking, and we were going to pool our resources and buy a house. And once we got married, we were going to move in together. So that's what we did. We bought this house. I moved in. I had my old trucks and stuff. She'd come around and visit, but then she'd go home. And then after we got married, she moved in.
Wow.
That's how we did it. We were a bit old-fashioned, because I'd seen
the other side of it.
Yeah.
And that always deters you from doing something like that.
Yeah. So,
She must have been a bloody resilient woman, mate. Like, she's an amazing woman now. I know her very little, but to put up with you doing those things and then going, oh, yeah, we've got 20,000 to spend and I've just spent 55,000 and I'm going to become a pilot and I'm in love with this reef that I saw a few years ago. And I've just finished riding motorbikes. And, mate, she must have seen something in you.
Yeah, don't know, because she was certainly copping a bit of flack from the home side. Her parents didn't dislike me, but I think they just thought, A, she's too young, and B, must be someone better out there for her than this fella, I don't know. They never said that to me, but I often wondered that, and I often still do. But anyway, we fell in love and we got married.
Yep.
And away we went, and we got into it there and did the cleaning, did the other work, and we got on, because she still had her job. We needed her income because my income was not really guaranteed besides my parks cleaning.
Yep.
Everything else was maybe if I got a firewood job or if I got a tree cutting job. And I got pretty good at knocking trees exactly where I wanted them to go. I spoke to some really good blokes. And my grandfather, you got to remember, was a tree cutter and a timber cutter. So somewhere down, that filtered down through the old man to me. And I loved timber, but I was pretty good at managing big trees. And it was in the days when there was no cherry pickers and stuff and there was no insurance, and I'd put some trees down to make your hair go curly right there. And I knew damn well if I get this wrong, I'm just going to get in that truck and go as fast as I can. And I never ever did. I never ever had to run. I got them right where I wanted myself.
It's such a skill to do. Like if you're fell in a tree, it is a skill to get it to drop in the right position.
So some of them you got to get up there and bring bits out.
Yep.
So I'd bring bits out a bit at a time. I remember up there one day waking up. I'd fallen, but I was smart enough to have harnessing and stuff. And waking up, chainsaw idling near my head, I'd been knocked out, I'd fallen out. And just by sheer good luck, I hadn't hurt myself badly.
Wow.
and the young fella's down the bottom yelling at me, and I've been unconscious for a few seconds. I've just the branch has gone and shit's gone wrong, and I've near got hurt. So again, that's when the survival instinct to me said, you need to slow down on this, you're likely to get hurt. So I backed away from that game a bit more, but it was good. You could make some good money because I would walk in and people would say, I'd do something, and they'd say, can you cut that tree down? And I'd look at it and I knew straight away. I'd say, how much did you get quoted? Because you knew someone else had quoted, some guy with a cherry picker, and then they might have been thousands. And I would usually just aim for half and trust my wits that I could manage it, and I would manage it. And so I still did
really
good.
didn't take no for an answer.
No.
It didn't in any of these situations. That's the moral of the story in every one of your situations.
Yeah.
So just say no, I can do it.
I learned to use metal wedges. I could wedge a tree up and over. Like with I remember one massive tree at Red Hill, and I remember thinking when I got halfway through, why did you say yes? Why did you just not walk away from this tree? And it's too late to change your mind. You're there, drive it. And so I did, and I drove it, and I had the wedge how I wanted it, and I wedged the tree up and back down where I wanted it. And I remember looking, thinking, how did you get away with that? Like it was going wrong, and it was going to fall on his house, and it was a big tree, and his house was going to be splinters if I got it wrong. I remember him coming to me and saying, you got your money too easy. I said, mate, you have no idea how much stress I went through in that half an hour, because like he's expecting this tree's going to take me days, and I've knocked it down in less than an hour, and he's gone, how did you do that? I said, well, mate, that's what I quoted you. I told you that's how I was going to do it. So I wasn't frightened to trust and back myself.
So when did let's go down the piloting side of things. So we've had the love for airplanes when you first went up in your airplanes. You've had the models. Your uncle has been flying. You've quit motocross. You've started in aviation. Take me through that path.
So 84, we've got married. I'm cleaning the parks. I'm doing all those odd jobs, building fences, cutting down trees. Middle 84, I want to learn to fly. But flying takes money. So up until that point, it was just not possible. Racing bikes was great, but there was no money. Now all of a sudden I'm cutting down trees and I'm doing some jobs and I've got some money. And I believe I can afford to do this. I said to Julie, I can't keep cleaning parks all my life. And I'd woken up unconscious in a tree. I'm going to hurt myself doing this. Something's going to go wrong. We've got to get smart. I've got to find a career that's better for me long term. I'm going to learn to fly. Okay. He says, because I'd promised me mate Mike, who's by now, about that very time, he's laying in Brisbane getting his feet amputated.
Jeez.
And I've read about him in the newspaper. He was famous big time because he's lost his feet and he's not walking, and I'm now going to learn to fly, which is what I'd told him I was going to do.
Yep.
And he reminded me of that. So I did. So I went out to Archfield and had the money. So I'd go out in the morning, I'd do the parks, I'd do something. Then in the afternoon, I'd go and have a flying lesson or two. Then come home in the afternoon and I'd study. And in 1 year, I got a private license, a commercial license, a multi-engine instrument rating, and a float plane endorsement. Because while I was learning to fly, someone said to me, I just got talking, because everyone wanted to go to the airlines. So that was what you did. That's what pilots did. But I've asked a few questions. I quickly learnt that the airlines had the highest divorce rate of any company in Australia.
Right.
So I ain't going down that road. I'm not going to be an airline pilot because I've seen what divorce does to kids. I ain't going there. So I decided not to join the airline. So I've got to make a business of this. And so I'm thinking of the reef, but I don't know how I'm going to do it. It's just a hazy goal that I'm going to bring in there somehow. And some bloke says to me, why don't you go and learn to fly them float planes? I says, hey, there's these float planes down at Southport. Bang, next day I'm down there. I've rung the bloke, I'm down there, and he's teaching me how to fly. And within an hour, I'm solo in the bloody thing. There's 206 on floats, and I'm like a rat with a gold tooth. It's a boat that flies. How cool is this thing? And it can take me to the Barrier Reef. All the boxes are ticked. So, mate, you just could not wipe the grin off my face. And I took to it like a duck to water.
So did you say it took you a year to get that? Like, so you got all those licenses within a year?
Yeah.
And nowadays, incredible.
Yeah. And if you look at it now, if you go full time into a flying school, to do that in a year is remarkable. And I did it while I was working and running all those businesses and doing those things. And in amongst it, God bless me, because Julie's mum and dad, one of the things they made money out of besides building things was they had car businesses. So in amongst all that, I had a car yard working with her father. So I'd go up to the parks and I'd come down. If I wasn't cutting trees, I'd be selling cars. I had so much
I
going
like
on.
how
It was
with this
insane.
story, there's always an extra layer. You go, oh yeah, just let me add on that I had three other jobs and I had a car yard at the same time as I was doing that. Yeah.
And Julie's old man is brilliant at building things. So he's got this dream he's going to build a boat, a commercial boat. But because he can do anything and build anything, we're going to do it ourselves. So by now we're married and he's convinced me we're going to build a boat. So I'm going to help him. So we go to school and we learn how to commercially weld and we get an approval to weld and we're going to build a boat. So in amongst all that, I'm helping him when he calls me, Pete, you need to give me a hand. We built a 60-foot aluminium cat. It's a beautiful boat. And as a family, we built it over about a 3 or 4 year period. And I started helping him the year. We started on it the year Julie and I got married. And just one of the other things we were doing, just fitting in amongst all that. I just sometimes think...
Did you ever sleep or go on holidays in this time period?
To be honest, I knew I was doing a minimum of 2 days work a day, 7 days a week, and I was quite happy to survive on 4 or 5 hours a night. My body won't let me do it now, not for long. But in them days, I was quite happy to. I would work till all hours of the night and then start early, and I was happy to do that. And because I knew I'd seen the pain of having no money and I'd seen the pain of failed marriages, and I wasn't going down either of those roads if I could. So I was working hard, I was putting in, but I was aiming for something that I loved to do. So this flower of environmental considerations opening up, as is the marine and the aviation. And when I flew the float plane, it was just very natural and easy to me. If you realise that when the first military airplanes went to war in World War I, they had planes, but where do you get your pilots from? So they didn't know what was a pilot. You know, who's a pilot? Who's the best pilot? Charles Kingsford Smith, who was one of our best pilots ever, his role prior to flying airplanes was a dispatch motorcycle rider. So it turned out the best pilots came off motorbikes.
Right.
Eye, hand, feet coordination. So by sheer coincidence, I'd come off a motorbike, got on an airplane. It was very easy, partly because I'd been thinking about it and studying it since I was 7, and partly because I had eye, hand, feet coordination, I guess, and I was prepared to put in the work and study like hell and learn like hell.
Do you remember the first time you flew up solo or jumped in the float plane by yourself? What was that like? Was that like a real sense of freedom as soon as you got up there?
Yeah, I can remember my first solo here at Archfield. I remember my first solo in the float plane was the first day I went out. Bill took me out in the left seat, him in the right seat, and Julie in the back. We did an hour and 20 minutes, and he said to me, because he'd tell me to do it, so I'd do it. If that's what you want, that's what you get. So I would do it. And he just said to me, "You're fine, son, just drop me there." Peel Island, I dropped him and Julie on the beach. I think I had about an hour and 10 minutes total and about 40 hours total flying. And I went and he said, "Just go and do some circuits." Blat. Off I went and did circuits.
Wow.
I just can't believe that he let me do that at that. No, either he was really crazy or I was very whatever. So, yeah, I was doing circuits real early and I just loved it. And I can remember my first trip to Lady Musgrave Island in that float plane. So once I learned to fly the float plane, I knew that's where my future was. And I said to Bill, "I want to buy this business. I'd like to buy a share of your business." And he said, "You're too late. I've sold it." "Who did you sell it to?" And it was a Melbourne family. So I'm going to come and meet them when they come. They're coming up from Melbourne to buy it off him shortly. I'm going to meet them, and hopefully they're going to sell me a share. And that was the O'Hare family, who quite a remarkable family, and another amazing story. You'd love to get hold of Terry O'Hare and hear his story, mate. Blow your mind. Another amazing guy that was in my life for a time. He built all the trucks with Recar written on them. That was his business. A 10-pound POM came into Australia, and he built the first over snow vehicles, the minis with tracks for the Snowy Mountain scheme. Another clever guy that could do anything, and he ended up buying that business for his son, and then I flew from, and I ended up buying the business off them, Sea Air. So, yeah, I could talk for hours, mate. But, yeah, the upshot was that by now I'm flying float planes, but I've still got a car yard. I've got a lady and a bloke running it for me, and I'd go in and out of there a few hours a day. I've still got my national parks cleaning contract. I've still got my trucks running around cutting firewood and stuff. By now I've bought a D400 ex-army truck with 10 seats down either side and a big roof over it. I've done my first tourist trip. We're going up into the mountains around Mount Nebo, where I'd go normally cutting firewood, and I'd take people up there on a tour, and I had a PA, and I'd give them a commentary about the bush.
Wow.
And we called it the Bush Safari.
And you're doing this, and you're bought a share into this. How did you fit it all in, Pete? Like, this equation does not add up in my head.
Yeah, and I think to myself, and Julie will confirm it, yes, we did all those things, because she just read it all to me with "This is your life," and I'm sitting thinking, Jesus, did we really do all that? And all my mates are saying, Christ, mate, I didn't know you did. Did you ever sleep? And I couldn't have done much sleeping, could I? But motocross taught me about efficiency of time. And with Lady Eliot, I talk about the 4 E's. If we want to look after the environment, we've got to be efficient in everything we do. We've got to look after the economics of it all, and we've got to educate effectively. And so efficiency to me was time and motion. On a motocross bike, I had to get to there and there and there as quick as I possibly could. So everything else I did, when I'm running around the national parks, how can I do it quickly? Can I cut a second out of there or 2 seconds out of there? And so everything I've ever done is about efficiency in time. And I'm still wired like that, as if I'm on a racetrack. And that's how I think. But I'm older, and I have to be cautious that you can't let the racing mentality become unsafe. You know, you've got to still, safety has to dominate now, because, of course, it's no longer just Pete on a bike who's going to get hurt. It's other people. So I've had to temper that enthusiasm with understanding risk management. And it's been great, because risk management's quite a remarkable subject. So now I'm efficient at that, and I can do a risk assessment while the other guys are still looking for the paperwork. And I've gone, bam, 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 there's the risks, and that's how we're going to manage it. So I'm very fortunate like that. And where that came from, who'd know? In amongst that whole litany of story.
So, mate, let's just quickly, because I know we're both running out of time, and it's been an amazing story, mate. But let's just touch on Lady Eliot a little bit more. So you've got to that point, you're doing all this stuff, you take over, like you said, you eventually take over safaris. Is that what?
The bush safaris?
No, the airline.
Sea Air.
So you eventually take over Sea Air, which is the airline kind of charter company that you still run to this day, and you still fly. That's where I met you, sitting on a plane from that when you picked us up and you took us over to the island. So you're still doing that. At what point did you start taking over as the caretaker of Lady Eliot Island, which is obviously such a huge part of your life today?
I learnt to fly. I flew for Sea Air. I quickly realised that I didn't have good experience. I sold everything I had, and I took a job in Broome flying beavers up there, float planes. And I flew for the Pearling Company up there. I did 6 months flying. I kept the house, but all my cars, everything else, my old trucks, I sold the national parks.
All the business is gone.
All my business is gone. Cashing up, I'm going to learn to be a pilot. So to be a pilot, I want to be a good one. I've got to learn. So I went bush, I went to Broome, I did my apprenticeship up there, I came back. I worked for Sea Air in 88 when Expo was on. We flew 5 trips a day from Gold Coast to Brisbane River, landed on the river here 5 times a day when Brisbane Expo was there. And again, I just applied efficiency and was able to make it work. During that time, the family who owned it went overseas and left me in the driver's chair. What a mistake. And I'm wanting to go to the Great Barrier Reef. So B blowed, a Japanese fella, Toshio Nishizawa, rings me on the phone one night. Haro, Peter-san, a customer want to go Great Barrier Reef. Yes. Pete only has one word, doesn't he? Yes, I can do that. Tomolo, how much? So I just worked out the charter rate. Yep, put an esky together. Julie and I knocked up an esky, some snorkels and fins. Blat, off we went. We went to Lady Musgrave. Did a day with these 2 Japanese, took them snorkeling, had lunch, come home. They've gone back, raved about how good it was. Haro, Peter-san, customer have a good day. You take 4 customers tomorrow?
Oh, wow.
Yep, off I went again. By the time the O'Hare family got back, Pete, how come you've done 40 hours this month? We normally do 10 or 15. Well, I went to Musgrave a few times, the Great Barrier Reef. Oh. They couldn't say no. But what could they say? It had been a success. So I started to do that more and more. Eventually I bought the business. I flew from the Gold Coast to Lady Musgrave with float planes. I started with 1, next thing I had 2, then I had 3. To get to Musgrave, I had to go past Eliot. Eliot was still going, doing, but some other bloke owned it, and it was way beyond, because I might have had 3 airplanes. What I really had was a massive debt with several banks. You know, I'd sold my house in Newmarket, which I'd paid 50-something for a lot more than that, 100 and something. So that was a great segue into the business. But man, getting into airplanes was a lot of money, and I needed the business and I needed the property that it worked from, which is our home. And so I boldly borrowed a lot of money and backed myself and bought the business after a period of time, at the end of 89, basically, Julie and I bought Sea Air, kept working Lady Musgrave while I eyeballed Lady Eliot and worked out how I was going to get hold of it. But I had no way of knowing. And one day, one of my pilots who I'd flown with rang me, and he was flying for the guy who owned Lady Eliot, and he said, I reckon if you got an appointment to see him, he might just talk to you. So I did. It took me a year of having appointments with this bloke in Maryborough. His name's Bevan Whittaker, another amazing mentor. Sadly, he passed only last week at 90. We said goodbye to him. And I convinced him after a time, easily a year, just wearing this old bugger down, because his history is another amazing fellow. He started Noosa Air, which became Sunstate Airlines. In his peak, he had about 300 pilots and aeroplanes up and down the East Coast, and he sold Sunstate Airlines to James Strong, which was then Australian Airlines, which now is QantasLink. So his original air service became QantasLink. And I convinced this old fella with a handshake that let me come in there with my passengers. I'll take the floats off my planes, because by now I'd bought my first Cessna Caravan. Man, was that a story, a whole nother story. It'd take us a couple of hours to tell you that one, how I got that caravan into the country, because no one wanted to loan me $1.25 million when I'm 30-something and I owe more than you could imagine. But I managed to find a way. And so he's thinking, who is this young fella? He's got a caravan. So I had his attention, and how I got him to back me was I said, my lawyer and I have discovered that your lease expires in 2005. He said, how do you know that? I said, well, there's a thing called freedom of information. We've worked it. We've looked at it. I took a risk. He could have told me to get out and never come back, but I thought he's a guy that supports courage and hard work. He was a hard worker, mate. He was the king of hard work, this old boy. And I said, I'm going to be 45 then, and you're going to be 80, 75 actually, he was going to be. So that'll be about time for you to sell it. And that's 10 years away. That'll give you 10 years to teach me how to be strong enough to make that business work, and I'll buy it all off you. And he looked at me, and I could see it was going to go one way or the other, so either piss off and then he stuck out his hand and we shook hands.
Wow.
10 years later, I bought it off him.
Wow.
Yeah. So I bought all these planes one at a time, because by now, not only am I a pilot, I'm an aircraft engineer. I've put myself through homeschooling. I've passed 10 or 11 exams. I've become a licensed aircraft engineer. But I've got engineers working for me. I've now got several airplanes, and I've got a business that's starting to get a bit of a head of steam going, and we're doing lots of different stuff with our airplanes. But burning inside me is there's more to life than just I've learned how to work hard. I've learned how to make money, I suppose. But every cent I had went back into my fleet of planes. I was never flash. I was never the rat with the gold tooth, you know. I was just happy to work hard and achieve, but I just knew there was more in life, and I wanted to make a difference, and I wanted to leave a mark before I went. And Lady Eliot gave me that chance, and I could see it just screaming at me. This place needs loving. It needs looking after. You love planes, you love boats, you love people, you love talking to people, you love showing people a good time. This place needs care. It's a gem that needs someone to polish it and look after it, you know. And I just said, I got to do it somehow. And so many people said to me, you are crazy. You're never going to make this happen. It was an unreachable goal. And even my lawyer said to me, Pete, just forget it. You're never going to get there. I said, don't you tell me that. I'm going to get there. And Bevan had a number that he wanted. And Mike just said to me, Pete, just look at the number. Where are you ever going to get that money? I said, don't worry about it. I said, I'm telling you that when the day comes, that old bugger will give it to me. You watch. I said, you watch. And within reason, and it's a complex story and another heap of hours, that's pretty much what happened.
Right.
And he shook me hand, and he loved the fact that what I did with it since I've took it on, he could never have imagined.
So you proved yourself over that 10-year period to him that he had enough understanding. He wasn't all about the money, obviously. He was just about, here's someone that's going to take over what I've started and keep going with it, and that's good enough for him to kind of...
And he was from what I call the old school. He thought I was a knucklehead with regard to environmental stuff. You're going to do what?
Yep.
You're going to get rid of generators? You're going to plant all these trees? What do you want to do that for? What? It's a business, son, and it'll kill you. If you don't work hard, it'll kill you. It will just run you out. This is a monster. I don't think you're tough enough. Yeah, no, I don't think you're. That was the sort of thing he'd say to me. Nah, you're not strong enough. And now and again he'd say to me, I could see the weakness. He'd say, oh, you got a bit of sting in your tail, son. You might just make it. He was harder than old Boots. There was no one harder than old Bevan. I've met some hard men in my time. And we didn't always see eye to eye, I've got to say. But one of the beauties about life and lessons is we learn off people. Sometimes we learn things we want to do, and sometimes we learn things we don't want to do and we don't want to be. But we still admire the person and we still take the lesson, because there's things that's happened to him in his life, like my dad and like my mum. And we've got to be big enough to forgive them or to accept their differences. But that's, to me, you use it whatever you want. It's development, it's progression, it's growth. Learn the good things of that man. Recognise that those things weren't necessarily what you want to do or be, but you're going to take all the best bits and you're going to learn from the challenging bits. And so he taught me stuff, mate. And yeah, I don't easily shed a tear, but a week or so ago when he passed, I had a little tear in my eye at the service for him.
Understandable, mate. It sounds like it was a big influence in your life.
He was.
And did some great things to make you where you are today. So sounds like an incredible man. I've got a couple of questions for you, Pete. First of all, for anyone young starting out, right, you said yes to everything. You've done so much different stuff that's worked out for you, stuff that's, like you just said, help you grow and help you build you into who you are today, whether it's good or bad. Do you find yourself, or do you have any advice for anyone younger starting out with this? There's a world of possibility out there and they can do anything, and you didn't start from great beginnings. You didn't have a silver spoon in your mouth. What advice, if any, would you give to them?
I think, great question, and I sometimes ponder it, and I get asked it sometimes in different ways. To me, the big one is believe in yourself. Have confidence in yourself that you can do things. Never believe the negative influences of other people. Don't be told no, because the world is full of people that'll tell you, you can't do this, you can't do that. Oh, no, don't do that. No, you're crazy. The world's full of that. Just don't hear that. That's white noise. Let it go. If you think you can do it, if you think there's a way, then do it. If you believe you can do it, do it. And people say to me, oh, yeah, but, it was easier when you did it. Yeah, well, I remember borrowing money, $400,000 in 1988 at 18.5% interest. Tell me about hard. It was $5,000 a month in repayment, and $4,800 odd of that was interest, and the other $200 was coming off the capital. Mate, okay, so yes, now the purchase price of a house might be higher, but the interest rate is less. There is always an opportunity out there. You just got to look for it, and you just got to say yes, and you got to back yourself, and you got to put in. I think the hard bit is, was it fair that I worked 15, 18, 20 hours a day for years and years? Is that reasonable? Is everyone going to want to do that? Probably not. So I guess that's a personal thing. I actually enjoyed it. Didn't faze me, didn't scare me. It didn't put me off. I
think a lot of that comes down to, from what I've done in my life, is it comes down, and we talked about this beforehand, it comes down to happiness in your life. If it's giving you happiness, if you're in the grind and you're doing that and that's making you happy, then that's you to a T. That mightn't be me, because me cutting timber and hiking up a mountain, building a fence all day, probably not going to make me the happiest man. But I will work happily 18 hours on a shoot, and we've done that this year where I've worked day and night, and I'll do it and I'll be happy as Larry, and I won't skip a beat, and I won't complain too much, and it's life, and so finding something that you're really passionate about and making happiness the focus and putting all your eggs in that basket will result in other things coming from that.
Happiness comes in many ways. I've often pondered happiness and success, and one of them is, I think, a really important one. I get a lot of enjoyment out of seeing other people having a good time, helping other people to enjoy themselves. I love taking people flying and showing them the beauty of the Barrier Reef. I love taking them out on a glass bottom boat. I love taking them snorkeling. I love taking them out to Birdsville, showing them Big Red, showing them Lake Eyre, telling them about it, educating them. And I love to do that efficiently, because I also like to make money while I'm doing it, because I recognise if I don't make money, I can't keep doing it. And they don't expect me to do it out of my pocket.
Yep.
People, if they appreciate what you're doing, they expect you to earn a comfortable living out of it. And one of the things I say is, it's not about making a fortune, it's about making a difference. But that doesn't mean I'm going to work for free. It means on my road to making a difference, I need to make money to do it. I need the resources. The Lady Eliot entity now is substantial. There's 10 airplanes. There's an island. We've spent a fortune on the island. There's a couple of $1 million worth of solar panels and batteries out there. That's come from hard work and passion, but people spend their money with us because when they see what we do with the money, Pete doesn't go and buy flash toys. Pete puts it back into the island. He does things to make that island better because Pete, long term, from this young fella that had these funny, hazy goals, has been able to, I guess, bring those goals to reality, or those dreams, probably more so than goals. And I think what I would say to young people is never be frightened to dream. If you can dream it, you can see it, you can have it, you can do it. You know, one of the things I say to people is human beings used to live in caves and eat cockroaches or whatever was in the cave. But some of us got bold enough to grab a stick and go out and try and whack a dinosaur over the head. And, you know, like that was the sort of thing that someone had the courage to go out and do it. See it, dream it, do it, take the step. Sadly, along the way, some of those aspirations and goals have led us to challenges. Climate change, energy, we learned about fuel and coal and burning wood, and it made our lives more comfortable. But now here we are looking at that and going, gee, that's actually been a negative, but we didn't know it when we were doing it. But that's okay. Accept responsibility for yourself and who you are and where you are right now and go, okay, well, Grandpa didn't know when he was cutting the trees down up in the mallee or digging the coal out that it was going to hurt the planet. But I do, so I'm going to fix it so that tomorrow's kids have got a more hope of a future. So the other thing I would say to young people or people of the future is accept responsibility for yourself. Don't wait for handouts. Don't wait for people to come and look after you. You look after yourself. You get on and do it, but treat people well, and people will treat you well. It's just, to me, that is just so important.
Phenomenal advice, mate. That is fantastic advice. It's a fantastic story. Before we wrap up and get to where we've got to go, mate, let's just plug Lady Eliot Island very quickly because it is an amazing place, and we only got to the point where we're just getting there, and we could talk for another 5 hours just on Lady Eliot, the restoration it has gone through, the whole journey of Lady Eliot, where it is now, how amazing the resort is now, what you do out there. But just give me a little quick overview spiel of all the incredible stuff. You won the Eco-Tourism Award for the state last night, which is a huge deal. Yep. There is an applause button somewhere. We'll add that in post. Big applause. So just give me the overview for people at home who haven't gone there. I've been fortunate enough to go there twice in the last 2 years filming for Crikey It's the Irwins, and it is a phenomenal place. So what's going on out there? What's out at the moment?
Thanks, Steve. It's an amazing place, and it gets in your heart like a hook, and it's in my heart deeply now. And the longer I live there, the more I love it. It's a remarkable coral cay. It's a natural coral cay. It's all organic. It's 80 kilometres from the nearest coastline. It's way out at sea. The only real access is by air. So the airstrip was there when we took over, but it had been mined. So all the trees were cut down. All the vegetation was gone. We've started to replant them. There was a small resort. We've improved on it. But way out at sea like that, where do you get your power from? So it used to have diesel generators. They were noisy. They were smelly. They were uncomfortable. It was against our early learnings in the mid-90s of climate change. So we aspired to go to solar power and wean our way off the diesel. And the big aspiration was, can we teach people that you can do this? This can be done. So what a great opportunity to use it as an educational platform. Efficiency, economics, education. When we're talking about looking after the environment. So we make all our power now from the sun. As of about 3 weeks ago, we hit the goal that we thought we dreamed of hitting, never really knew whether we'd get there. We don't burn diesel anymore. All our power comes from the sun.
Phenomenal.
It is insane. I can't believe we got there, you know. And of course, so what do we use the power for? Because we're out at sea, now covered in birds. Birds poop on the roof. You don't get the water off the roof. It's a pristine coral cay in a World Heritage Site. So you can't pull the water out of the ground. You would upset the balance and you'd kill the trees. So the only water you can get is desalinated. You've got to pull the water out of the sea, push it up to 800 psi of pressure, like high pressure, which takes heaps of power, desalinate it, and that becomes your water. Then you use the water for showers and cooking and toilet and everything else. Now you've got to treat it in a World Heritage area. So we use power to make the water, power to treat the water. We treat the water to an A+ standard, and then we irrigate it out onto the airstrip. But the forest needs to be redone. So we've spent stacks of money, over $1 million of our own funds, or when I say our funds, really the customer's profit. Any profit we make just goes back in it. I still don't pay myself a wage out of Lady Eliot. Whatever is left goes back. I take my wage out of my airplanes. But we make our water, we make our power, we treat our water, we make somewhere between 400 and 500 plus meals every single day. We've got 43 rooms out there in this pristine place, and when you go snorkeling, it takes your breath away. And you don't have to be a scuba diver, but you can, and the diving there is second to none. But the snorkeling is so simple. The accommodation is right on the beachfront in most cases, so from your room you can walk down and snorkel in a metre of water with turtles and fish and corals. It's just breathtaking place. And because we're protecting it and looking after it, nature's reciprocating. No question, nature's paying us back. One of the things we did when we first got involved was we got declared a green zone, a total protection, no-take zone. When I first went there with Blair and the boys, you could fish, you could spear, you could do what you like. And there wasn't many big fish. There was a few, but not many. And there was some mantas. We got involved with Bevan and the Marine Park. And in 2004, because our goal was to take it over in 2005, we pushed really hard to get it declared a green zone, and it has been since 2004. And in that 15-year period, the fish have got more and bigger, the corals have got better, our trees are growing, and as you said in the early introduction, now the trees have got more birds. What we didn't know when we were doing it was the trees would actually improve the coral. Who would have thought? We were just trying to do the trees because the trees were gone, but they actually improved the coral and the fish because they're part of this natural cycle. And there's now scientific papers out there written about this cycle. And people come and talk to me, Pete, who didn't even finish school, went to dozens of schools, and pick my brain on what I've seen and learned, and we collaborate, and we all talk on an interesting level. So it's an awesome place.
Well, mate, I can attest to that. It is a phenomenal place, and anyone that hasn't been there, whether you're from Australia or you're visiting, you want to see the reef, you just want to go out and relax for a few days and eat, because that's one thing you can do well at the island is eat. I strongly recommend everyone go out there and do it, because it is absolute paradise on earth. Mate, it has been such a pleasure. This has really meant a lot to me, so thank you. You're a legend, mate. I appreciate it. Let's get our tuxedos on and go dancing, mate.
We're going dancing, mate. Thanks so much for your time, and you did an amazing job, because you pulled it out of me, some of the stuff I had to work with, as you saw, and had to think hard to get it out. And yeah, so thanks so much. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I hope it hits the buttons you want it to hit. You did well, mate. Thanks so much. Good on you. Cheers.
Thank you all so much for listening. Please share and subscribe to the podcast, and make sure you reach out to us on all the social media platforms. More importantly though, make sure you jump onto the Lady Eliot Island website and plan a trip out to this incredible island. You will not regret it. All right, that's it. Have a great day.